Gastronomy.
Yeah.
We've got some astrology stuff. I don't know about it. I don't know, but
Wow, that's really impressive.
That's all right.
Gastronomy, that's right. It is quite cool. I do love some.
oh yeah.
Every time I look at it, it's pretty good.
It's good.
Alright folks, good morning everybody, and for those of you who are new to Singapore, welcome to Singapore. It's great to see a lot of, or a number of familiar faces here. Kevin, Ken, Tony, there's Tony as well, so thanks for coming back. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Jason Full, I'm the Trade Director for the Victorian Government Trade and Investment Office here in Singapore. I've got a few housekeeping activities just to run you through today. Then I'll introduce our Commissioner who will say a few welcome comments, and then we'll hand over to our industry partners, industry platform, who will take us through today's session and also just brief us on the rest of the program for today. I know that we've got a busy 3 days ahead with our industry day today, and of course day one of Big Data and AI World Trade Show, that's tomorrow, Wednesday, and then day two on Thursday. So just a few quick housekeeping points. Of course, nothing's going to happen, but should something happen, go out of the building the way you came in, straight out the exit. Washrooms are just down this corridor here, just immediately behind this wall, and of course tea and coffee, some light snacks there at the back. We do have a working lunch today. It'll be like a boxed lunch, sandwich, drink, that type of thing, but by all means there's a fair bit of catering down here, so please get into it. Now, firstly, to kick things off, I'm going to ask Naila Mazuko, our Commissioner for Victoria, for Southeast Asia, to come up. Naila is our Commissioner. We've had the pleasure of working with Naila now for a little over a year, probably the best part of 15 months. Naila is based in our Jakarta office. Of course, most of you know we have 4 offices for the Victorian government here in Southeast Asia, 24 around the world, but 4 just here in our own local region. So I think it goes without saying that you've got a lot of support right across our offices in Singapore, Jakarta, Ho Chi Minh City, and also KL. So with no further ado, I think I'll call Naila Mazuko, our Commissioner, to the mic.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's fantastic to see everyone here in Singapore. I won't take up too much time because we obviously want to get started and stuck into the program this morning, but just a couple of thank yous and acknowledgements. A really big thank you to the team at SG Innovate for hosting us here in this terrific facility. Dr. Frederick, who we will be hearing from shortly from the Economist Corporate Network, and our partners at the ASEAN Innovation Business Forum. I also wanted to acknowledge my colleagues here who have been traveling in from our various offices. So Irawan, who's here from Jakarta, Trent, who's here from Vietnam, Troy, who's here from Melbourne, who all of you know, and of course Jason, based in Singapore. And a really special shout out to Jason and Troy for all the phenomenal work that they've done on pulling this delegation program together, and to Irawan and Trent, who have also been fundamental in making it all happen. So it's a really exciting time to be here in Singapore. You know, it's a digitally connected, highly integrated market in the region. It's a gateway to Southeast Asia, gateway to ASEAN, which is an even bigger market of 680 million people. All very different markets in the region, and that's why we brought in some of our team from across the region to really help you think about and shape your approach, not just in Singapore, but thinking about how this could be a regional play as well. Because Singapore Tech Week, while it happens in Singapore and is a major event with buyers, intermediaries from Singapore, you will also encounter people from right across the region. So it's really good to have that additional insight, which Frederick will be briefing us on, but additional insight and support that will equip you with those kinds of conversations over the next couple of days. This is one of those trade events that's really concentrated in 2 days. You're not here for 3 when you're thinking about Southeast Asia, I'll mention that it is a really good time because there is a lot of enabling policy architecture that's been developed that is very active. There's a lot of conversations around Singapore's new AI strategy. There's conversations around ASEAN's digital framework, digital economy framework, so that's a regional initiative. And we also have the Australia-Singapore Digital Economy Agreement, which is streamlining a lot of the work in cross-border digital trade. So you've already got some macro frameworks that will support some of the initiatives and some of your work, but it's good just to be aware of that there is this enabling architecture here in the region. I'll say that it's also good to keep in mind just a couple of things as you engage this week. First, trust and assurance are real commercial advantages here. So people will want to know how your solutions handle governance, security, and compliance. Secondly, enterprise solutions are increasingly outcomes driven. So people will want to know how your solutions reduce risk, improve productivity. They'll want to know specific case studies. So if you can present in your value proposition examples of the success story, particularly from critical priority sectors that are of interest in this region, healthcare, financial services, retail, manufacturing, energy, any of those sectors, you'll support some of your pitch. And thirdly, the routes to market here really rely on the right partnerships. You will hear this in every market around the world. Partnerships are important, but it's about how do you approach partnerships in that particular market? How do you approach partnerships in Singapore? How do you approach partnerships in Indonesia, Vietnam, and other markets, Philippines? So these are all things that you will hear about today, and please lean on our team, lean on our partners, ask questions to validate some of your thoughts and assumptions and your approach. So today's program has really been created carefully to give you a strong starting point over the next 2 days. So you'll hear about Southeast Asia's outlook and Singapore's digital priorities. You'll take part in a go-to-market workshop to test and validate some of your assumptions and your approach to refine some of your strategies. And then over lunch, you'll hear directly from local leaders about enterprise solutions and procurement challenges, and there'll be a couple of site visits to showcase some of the partnerships in action with leading corporates. And then tonight, there's a culmination of the Australian High Commission. It tends to be a very big networking event. There'll be a lot of people. It's a great chance to meet and connect with other delegates who will also be attending, as well as sort of government and industry officials as well. The market here is highly competitive, but success is absolutely possible. So use the proof points, use your sharp differentiating factors to really highlight how you can make a difference and contribute to a very strong return on investment. So please, again, as I mentioned, use our team here on the ground. That's what we're here for, to validate your ideas, sense check things. You might meet someone on the stand, come and ask the questions, let us know how we can support you. Think of us as an extension of your business development arm. When you're not here, use our team. Use our team to go out and make those connections. Use our team to stay connected with the you have met and the connections that you've made. I'll just finish off by saying keep in mind what Singaporean customers expect. So clear metrics on ROI, security, compliance, and AI assurance. The more you put into the next couple of days, the more you'll get out of it. So please be proactive. If you need some ideas, we're very happy to help, to connect you and to make sure that you succeed and get what you want out of this mission. So your success is our success. Please stay connected with us. We'll be also very interested in your feedback. So Troy and Jason will come out with some feedback surveys at the end. I know that after the mission is done, you don't always want to complete the survey, but it does help us continue to be able to put these things on and to be able to continue to support you, but also to articulate, your success and raise the profile of your success as well. So please bear with us as we seek those feedbacks from you. That's really it for me. I wish you a productive day. Look forward to seeing you over the next couple of days. I'll be on the stand tomorrow. We'll try and get to meet and chat with as many of you as possible. But thanks very much for joining us, and I'll hand you over now to Jason.
Thanks, Nala. Great comments, and I think many of you would have heard those sentiments before, and they really don't change. It's a very competitive market, but as Nala said, we have our 4 offices in our team right here to help. So please keep in touch at all points. Let me just also echo the thanks to Chris and SG Innovate, CUN, all the efforts, over here, all the efforts have been fantastic working with you on the program. Troy, of course, I know no project manager like Troy. He's been whipping me into shape as much as he's been communicating to you all as well. Look, I now really have just probably one more comment, and that's about logistics today. We do have a tight program, but we've packed a lot in there, and it's just so you can benefit. So being timely and being on point is important. So if you get me pushing you from behind to say get on the bus, we need to do that. So thanks for everyone's attention to that. And because we will be moving between our sessions. And just echo again what Nella said about feedback. We do value your feedback. It helps us benchmark and build on these programs year on year. And it might not be the same big WNA world. It might be a parallel industry event that we'll do for other delegates from Victoria. So now I have the pleasure of actually introducing our program partners, ASEAN Innovation Business Platform, and in particular, YY. Thanks for coming up.
Welcome everyone to Singapore. I heard that some of you had a chance to eat at Lau Pa Sat yesterday. How many of you missed this opportunity to eat at Lau Pa Sat? A couple. Don't worry, we'll make it up very quickly later on. So my job here is to work together with Jason and Naila to really help to shape this program. Any of you fans of F1? Yes. Yeah, okay. Fans of F1, so you know Oscar Piastri, right? So in F1 you have 3 days, right? So it starts off with like the practice rounds, and you have the qualifiers, you have like the actual race day. So think of this program as like 3 rounds. So today is practice. So make sure that you have as much practice as possible. This is a rundown of what's going to happen for today, your full-on practice. We start off by giving you an overview of the market, and we have economists who will be sharing some insights into Southeast Asia, and later on it's a hands-on workshop. So our CEO, Erza, will be going through with you some of the concepts of doing business in Southeast Asia, and you're very much aligned with what Naila has mentioned. We look at governance, we also look into how do you appeal to the businesses of this customers that you're looking to do. So it's no longer just about technology, but the business outcomes that your firm can help them with. So that's what we'll be going through, and there will be a workshop on that. You think about practice, right? And we're going to throw you a little bit more into the deep end of the pool. During lunch, we will be meeting with some of the government stakeholders, the enterprises, where you get to ask them questions. And this is a good time to also validate some of like the ideas that you have. How does it fit into the Singapore, the Southeast Asia market? So please use that to do so. It's a nice little practice before you go for your very important dinner meeting later on. And in the afternoon itself, we will be all helping Jason to usher you onto the buses so that we can go to other parts of Singapore. I know that a lot of programs you will usually see Marina Bay Sands, you see the CBD area, but today it'll be a really fun time. We'll be getting you to other parts of Singapore which you may not usually encounter, but if you have not had Lau Pa Sat food, the areas that we're bringing you to will have good Singaporean food too. So with that, that's all I have to say to you today. You'll see and hear a lot of me. I'll be working very closely with Jason to make sure all of us are right. And thank you very much for joining us today, and please feel free to ask us any questions that you have with regards to doing business in Singapore and Southeast Asia. All right? Thank you so much.
And now, on great pleasure of inviting Fred Klein from the Economics Corporate Network to the stage to take us through a very broad overview, macro level of ASEAN, Southeast Asia, and opportunities that you might not already know.
I'm hiding behind
Yeah, Thank you so much.
Hey guys, welcome to Singapore. I hear most of you are not from here, so welcome. And thank you so much, Renela and Jason, for inviting us, having us here, the Economist Corporate Network, at this event. You also, Jason is particularly nice to you because you're staying in a particularly nice part of town. So please make use of it. And yes, it is much more than just Lau Pa Sat. Although coming from Melbourne, I hear your bar scene is pretty decent. So you may find this slightly different, though maybe not necessarily better than what you're used to. In any case, I know time is of the essence, and I have led delegations before. Jason, I know what it feels like to take people on the bus. It is a rewarding, but not always a very pleasant job, definitely very stressful. So I will stick to my time that I've been allocated, which is pretty much exactly 30 minutes. I want to keep it interactive, so if you have any questions, if you want to share your experiences, or if you want me to delve a bit longer on a topic that perhaps I jumped over too quickly, feel free. I'm a service provider. I'm here for you guys. So I'm happy to entertain any thoughts, any of your wishes here during this presentation. By way of introduction, I think it's more than enough to say, my name is Fred, and I'm happy to be addressed as such, and I know Southeast Asia reasonably well. That's already more than enough. So let's not start with this. Let's start with this. Okay. So this is here our global overview, and this is, though of course a flawed indicator, but a GDP growth in general does of course tell you where a lot of economic activity takes place, though it does not take account of the starting point, for example, from which individual regions and countries start. So if you look at this map, right, and you were an alien ship and you would land here and you had no political or economic bias, you didn't know the world whatsoever, but you had a bunch of alien currency on you, you would wonder where you could invest that alien currency, you would probably look at the regions where most growth is taking place. And it would inevitably bring you to sub-Saharan Africa, and then you would land there with your alien ship and you would realize, well, the growth is pretty strong, but they're coming obviously from a very, very low base. So very likely, unless you're a very risk-prone entrepreneur, you would probably move on and you would go to the next region, and that's South and Southeast Asia. And increasingly, again, relatively new news, Japan and South Korea as well, but we keep this for another time. So let's focus on Southeast Asia for a while. This is really where you have the very strongest growth globally going forward for the next, and this is what I would call a forecastable period. Yeah, so that's probably 2 to 3 years hence. So if you look at the region here, you would probably be thinking this is a pretty good place to invest in general, not because it has the strongest growth rates in the world. No, this is indeed sub-Saharan Africa, because it has very strong growth rates given the state it starts from. Yeah? In terms of business environment, legal structures, and growth that has been taking place over the past 2 decades. So I think it is fair to say that we at The Economist, and indeed all forecasters, overreacted slightly after April 2nd, and we panicked a bit, and we had massive downgrades of our growth forecast for South and Southeast Asia, particularly countries in Southeast Asia. Why is that? Because the growth model, and this is something that Southeast Asia simply just replicates from the growth story of East Asia in the past, is that we grow predominantly by external demand. And a lot of this external demand comes, yes, from Australia, but let's be honest, you're relatively wealthy, but you're not that many. So most of our external demand, the source of external demand is predominantly the United States, to some extent Europe as well, and of course, therefore, we downgraded quite substantially. Then as it does settle, we became a bit more sane, our heart rate cooled down, and we revised again upwards quite substantially. So now we are in a situation whereby we have individual economies, and because you're here on as an ASEAN delegation, let's look at the ASEAN economies in a bit more detail. So if you look at the individual economies here, you will see that some of the forecasts before April were actually stronger than the ones after. And you can see, vice versa, of course. The ones after April were stronger than the ones before, and particularly outstanding here is China. I don't want to speak a lot about China, but China is probably the greatest winner in Asia out of Trump's trade war. Counterintuitive, perhaps, but this is certainly the case according to our modeling. So if you look at the individual economies here, you do see, of course, quite a few big drops, in Vietnam being one of them, although I remain incredibly bullish in Vietnam, and I will speak a bit more about this in a second. You see quite a few downgrades here for Singapore, for Thailand, the economy in Southeast Asia that concerns me the most by far. Also, I will elaborate on this a bit in a second as well. So I don't want to spend too much time on talking about tariffs. For one, we have already spent far too much energy and analytical activity on this nonsense topic, yet it is reasonably important because of all that I just shared with you. What I do think it's almost irrelevant is focusing on the reciprocal tariffs, which is what we have been doing for the past, I guess, half a year or so. Why is it almost irrelevant? For one, most of the economies that we are looking at, South and Southeast Asia, ended somewhere between 15 and 20% reciprocal tariff rate. So if all of them, if you believe it to be true, what I said at the beginning, that all of them grow predominantly by external demand, bar a few exceptions, then tariffs are bad. Yes, but tariffs are essentially just a tax that make things more expensive. So what is really relevant is the tariff rate of your nearest peer competitor, right? So if you all land within the same range of plus minus 5% tariff rate, it doesn't really matter that much. Other fundamentals are much more significant than that. Another thing that I think is worth pointing out is that some economies, and specifically Vietnam here, to point out the most obvious one, spend quite a lot of energy and business class travel hours traveling to and fro their home country of origin and Washington, D.C. in order to negotiate. And some countries, like Thailand, for example, did barely any of that, right? So what you still end up with is pretty much the same, more or less the same tariff rate. So what that shows you is, in fact, Singapore spent also quite a lot of business class hours traveling to and fro Washington and Singapore, and they obviously got a pretty decent deal on that front. So my point being is that it didn't really matter that much. If you travel to Washington, D.C. and you negotiated with the White House until the cows come home, or if you just decided to ignore that and just continue with business as usual, didn't actually really matter all that much. In the end, India obviously being the most outstanding counterfactual to that. So what's much more important perhaps is, and I do actually need to update this now, is the reciprocal tariff rate. The sectoral tariff rates, which are much more important than the reciprocal tariff rates for several reasons. One is they tend to be much more sticky because they are legalistically much sounder in the United States legal structure. And in fact, these may actually fall before Christmas, who knows, right? So you have the sectoral tariff rate, which are substantially more important, and they are being rolled out. And the Trump administration does realize that if you follow the communication from the White House, they do realize that these are much more important, much more sticky, and perhaps the main source of tariff revenue going forward. And you realize this when you notice that actually they don't really talk so much about reciprocal tariff rates anymore in the past few weeks and months, but much more about the sectoral tariff rate, Section 232 tariff. Right? And here, then, the equation changes completely. So we in Singapore were rejoicing in our 10% lowest tariff rate, only the lowest tariff rate alongside Timor-Leste and all of ASEAN, which in my view was a big mistake anyway, because what we should be doing is we should signal regional friendship and cohesion, but that's an entirely different topic in ASEAN. We did rejoice in this and wondered if we can benefit from this relatively lower tariff rate. But then, so much more important, if you believe this to be true, much more important than sectoral tariff rates, then you end up with an entirely different equation altogether, because what doesn't really matter for your economy is not the reciprocal tariff rate as such, it is the weighted average tariff rate on all the stuff you export. Yeah? And then the equation changes, of course, quite substantially, particularly for Singapore, but also for others, for Malaysia, Vietnam, and so forth. So I said for a long time that reciprocal tariff rates will be, that sectoral tariff rates will be rolled out gradually and quite aggressively, and this is certainly the case right now. And I want to point out that, let's just presume, I believe the first hearing on this is in early November, on the court case that is taking place right now. So earliest, perhaps, you could see around Christmas a decision on this, perhaps much more likely earlier in the next year. And let's presume that these fall. I would say that would be almost as irrelevant as them having been put in place in the first place. Why? Because if these fall, the Trump administration is very, very unlikely to say goodbye to that nice revenue that has been collected in the past, and they will just roll out much more sectoral tariff rates, which are legally a bit more sound than the reciprocal ones and can be not so easily challenged in court. So what you would end up with is, if the court actually does decide that this is illegal and big refunds have to be processed by US Customs, then you can expect that these tariff rates will be going through the roof going forward, because the budget deficit, not least, depends on it. Right, so what happened is if you look at Q1 and Q2 figures for all the Southeast Asian economies, and in fact for some others as well, was you saw really strong growth rates, unexpected. Right? So I just mentioned that we were a bit negative, a bit pessimistic, and revised downward quite substantially, and then we got the Q1 2025 and Q2 2025 figures, and we were all surprised, beating expectations by a large part. And again, this is not just us at The Economist, this is across all forecasters. I don't know of anyone who didn't predicted these kind of growth rates. So the consensus among all forecasters was certainly a lot lower. We then investigated the figures, and we realized pretty quickly, oh, what has happened here is that these figures were driven predominantly by extreme export activity. Counterintuitive again, of course, at first, but with hindsight, we're all geniuses, so we think it through and back engineer and realize very quickly, well, of course, the tariffs were announced in April, and then they were immediately paused, and what happened is that all the companies in the United States rented a ton of warehouses and front-loaded their trade, right, their imports. So what basically happened is, from all the economies in Asia that export to the United States had a windfall in terms of their exports, which are then housed in inventories in the United States. The problem with that is that this is, of course, not newly created demand. It's not because the United States is suddenly buying more stuff because they are richer or more interested in our stuff. It is they are front-loading stuff. They're buying stuff that they would have bought otherwise in 2026, for example. So therefore, there will be a big payback. So what our prediction is now going forward is that the growth figures for 2026 will really be the ones where we can see the big impact of the tariffs. So this may sound all bad news, that in 2026 we will probably see pretty strong downgrades on growth in this region and everywhere else in Asia. But it is actually, I can assure you, this presentation is actually relatively positive, because what we do predict is that after this dip in 2026, growth will pretty quickly stabilize. And the reason for that is that the fundamentals still remain in place. The fundamentals in Southeast Asia for doing business, for growth, are fundamentally sound. And therefore, we do predict this growth being this dip in growth relatively short-lived. So if we look at a few economies here, I don't want to point out all of them, but let's look at, not least because we don't have time for that, but I want to point out a few. And I have here included, as you can see, I've included Singapore and the underperformers, and this is of course a bit unfair, because Singapore is of course a very different kind of economy from the rest of Southeast Asia. And given Singapore's maturity, a growth rate north of 2% is of course very, very respectable. So take this with a pinch of salt. As economists, we think in aggregates, and sometimes aggregates hide more than they reveal. Yeah? So, but what it does, what you can see with the other two here that are included in the underperformers, Myanmar, for obvious reasons, being downgraded quite substantially, and I'm afraid, as much as I love this country, they will have quite a lot of catch-up to do once their political situation calms down somewhat. Who knows when that will be. But let's look at Thailand for a second. I just mentioned before that I'm very pessimistic about Thailand. And indeed, it is, wherever you look in Thailand, it's going to be very, very difficult to see any sign of optimism. And this is very different from all the other ASEAN economies. So, preface this with a caveat that the fundamentals in Thailand are as sound as they are pretty much everywhere else in the ASEAN 6. So, these kind of situations, these dips that we are expecting now, can be overcome in the long run. But in the short term, Thailand does have indeed many problems. One, the two sectors that really drive the Thai economy predominantly are under severe threat. One is tourism, of course. Thailand is one of the economies, other than the only country that has been hit worse since the pandemic is the Philippines in terms of tourism. Thailand tourism is down very, very substantially, which does present a growth drag, of course, as well. So now, if you think back about 10, 15 years ago, tourism was up to 20% of GDP in Thailand. So now no economy should have 20% of GDP from tourism. That's not good. If you want to escape the middle income trap and become a high income economy, you shouldn't be so reliant on tourism, of course. Nonetheless, it is an important part of the Thai economy, and now it has dropped down to somewhere around 7%. The main reason for that is, of course, Thai GDP has grown, but it is also because the lack of Chinese tourists, which are the single largest source of tourism in Thailand. The Chinese tourists have, for many reasons, but predominantly for fear of the scam center abduction that have taken place in Thailand of Chinese citizens staying away from Thailand. So now, if the scam situation calms down, and Thailand has engaged, Thai Tourism Board has engaged proactively in PR in China, even if that would calm down at some point, I do know that there is a lot of people in the tourism industry in Thailand specifically who hope that these tourists will return. I would be very, 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 very reluctant to embrace that argument for the main reason that it is not that Chinese tourists travel less now. They just travel elsewhere. And what happens is if you go for a few years elsewhere, particularly Malaysia has seen a big uptick, Japan has seen a big uptick, Vietnam has seen a big uptick. What happens is that a tourism infrastructure develops around that, right? So you have tour operators and buses, and you have Chinese restaurants opening, and you have translators, tour guides who speak Mandarin and so forth. So what happens is this infrastructure is built up very, very quickly and continues to attract tourists. And then people won't go back to Thailand, at least not in the numbers as before. The second one is of course the automotive industry. And Thailand has really struggled in the automotive industry, and I don't want to go too deep into the detail unless somebody is specifically interested in it. But suffice it to say that since the 90s, Thailand has had a very strong IC, internal combustion engine industry, specifically in the northeastern part of Thailand, and a whole infrastructure of supply chain has built around that activity, which was predominantly Japanese automotive companies building in northern Thailand, and then sourcing increasingly from internal combustion engine supply chain in northern Thailand. What has happened is, of course, the ICE, specifically the Japanese and the German companies, are in big trouble and are receding from those production places and producing lower numbers and so forth. And what's happened is that a lot of Chinese companies have moved in, and these Chinese companies are predominantly, not exclusively, electric vehicles. Electric vehicles now are much less sophisticated in many ways, at least in the engine part. They don't need that supply chain anymore, yes? So while it is good that Chinese companies have moved in, they basically bring in the parts from China that they need. And it's not because they are nasty Chinese who don't want to use the Thai supply chain. There just isn't a Thai supply chain for electric vehicles in Thailand at this point in time, right? So what you have is a big drag on the secondary economy that was taking place around these Japanese auto manufacturers in Thailand. So politically, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but let's just suffice it to say it's very complicated and it's a big mess. And the tripartite of the military and conservative establishment, the working classes in Thailand, and the monarchy and the military hasn't really figured out a political future just yet. Let's put it like that. It's probably diplomatically the best way of putting it. So there is political uncertainty going on. Quite different, and this is quite the opposite case, is Malaysia. And I'm always surprised that whenever I talk about Southeast Asia, nobody really wants to talk about Malaysia. Everybody wants to talk about Vietnam, and they want to talk about Indonesia, and understandably so, but nobody ever wants to talk about Malaysia. And I go, why? Why nobody wants to talk about Malaysia? It's such an important economy, and it's growing so strongly as well. If you look at Malaysia as a very mature economy, just on the cusp by end of this decade, certainly moving into high income status, Malaysia is growing north of 4%. I always say, European and frankly Australians as well, Australian politicians would skin their grandmothers for a growth rate of 4%. Yeah? In Malaysia, you have it. Malaysia is a growing and dynamic economy, and what has held Malaysia back for a long time was, of course, political uncertainty, right? Tussles among the individual parties, race-based politics, all that mess. And yes, this is still taking place, but for the first time in a very long while, I'm looking at this region, working in and on this region for over 20 years now. I have observed that the times are changing, and we are no longer in the times of Mahathir. We are in the times now of a forward-looking Malaysian government that is, for the first time in a very long time, actually concentrated on what matters, which is finding Malaysia's role in the future global economy, right? Not fighting about all these, and I'm happy if anyone is interested to elaborate on the domestic politics of Malaysia, why that is so. But suffice it to say for now that we have a government that is focused on Malaysian growth going forward for the first time in a long while, which is not least the reason why we managed to get the special economic zone in Johor, of course, over the line. Happy to say a few words about this as well. So Malaysia is trying to find their new place in growth in the global economy going forward. So here we are. So if you look at the general growth trends going forward in 2028, what you are seeing is very, very strong, resilient growth going forward. You don't have to take photos if you want. Reach out to me. I'm happy to send you this presentation as well. You are, of course, allowed to take photos. I'm saying you don't have to. I'm happy to share it with you if you're interested in it. So especially if you are in the B2C business, directly selling stuff in the individual economies of Southeast Asia, then of course much more important perhaps maybe GDP per capita in purchasing power terms, right? Essentially, while this is perhaps very, very important if you do international business and you buy energy, oil on the market, in the global markets, this is much more important in terms of disposable income, right? What do people actually have to spend? And I have to exclude Singapore from this chart because Singapore would somewhere be here, around in this corner, yeah? With a very, very high, of course, outstandingly high GDP per capita. I have included your wonderful country, of course, with very, obviously as the leader here, created this chart specifically for you guys. But this is really where we are, right? And you see the average here of developing Asia and developed Asia, and you can really see where the individual economies are. Here we're going back to Thailand. Thailand, though having the highest household debt in all emerging markets in the world, it is a relatively high spending with relatively high disposable income economy. So selling stuff in Thailand, of course, still works. You have Indonesia as a very strong performer. Don't forget how many people live in Indonesia. Yeah? So this is a very, very strong performer here as well. So if you go down, we have relatively decent averages here for all the ASEAN 6, except of course Singapore, which is a big positive outstanding. So now, let's look at the other fundamental. This is perhaps the most important one, which is really business environments across South and Southeast Asia. Right? So most importantly to point out here, I guess, is two things. One, the economy in which you find yourself right now, Singapore, is the leader. This is why I have made it in bold. It is the leader of developing Asia. In fact, it is the leader in the world. So according to our global business environment ranking, Singapore does have the best business environment. The main drag on Singapore's rating, and this is why it doesn't achieve full points, are two things. One, market opportunity in Singapore itself being relatively limited, not least due to its size, but making up for it to some extent with its connectivity, of course. A lot of companies, Singapore is by and large a country of headquarters, yes? With companies who find it very important to have their legal structures in the headquarters in Singapore, doing businesses in Singapore, yes, but predominantly in the wider region, and Singapore is, of course, the best place to do that. The other one, I have highlighted Malaysia, because Malaysia is the outstanding one in terms of developing Asia. It is leading the category of developing Asia by a mile, and I shared with you, in a few years, Malaysia will probably move up into the next category of developed Asia. Perhaps here in a bit more detail, and this is just a selection of the indicators that we use. We use in total 99 indicators or 98 indicators. I've just selected a few that I thought are interesting. Let's pick out Vietnam, for example, one of the economies I'm most bullish about. So everybody was relatively negative on Vietnam, of course, because Vietnam does depend to such a large extent on the US market. But Vietnam is a remarkable flexibility approaching the socialist in the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. And you see, for example, that in our business environment ranking, Vietnam still struggles with the category of policy and attitude towards private enterprise. Of course, the clue is in the name. Yes, socialists don't necessarily tend to agree with private enterprises to that extent. But everybody who is interested in doing business in Vietnam, I do urge you to look up Resolution 68. Look up Resolution 68 on Google and read it. And you will be very surprised. Suffice it to say, the short version of it is, Vietnam's socialists are not so socialist anymore when it comes to private enterprise, and they have very much changed their attitude to private enterprise. And private enterprises are now able to access both capital as well as land, at least in theory for now, as state-owned enterprises in Vietnam as well. And Vietnam is similar to Malaysia, focused on finding Vietnam's next level to unlock growth going forward. And they're investing in all sorts of stuff, right? Taking on government debt to build infrastructure, of course. That's worked for Japan, that's worked for China. Why shouldn't it work for Vietnam? And this actually does create growth for quite a long time. So you can Keynesian yourself out of economic malaise within which you find yourself now. But it is also an economy that has a great wealth of STEM education. Yes, so you can position yourself as an R&D hub. For sure, why not? Labor costs, and generally input costs, still relatively low, and yet you have a very competitive workforce in Vietnam compared to the rest of the region, of course. So, looking at the other ones, you can of course see Malaysia, pretty outstanding. Singapore, I don't think I need to speak about that very much. But you do see a few lags here and there. For example, in the Philippines has struggled quite a lot in the past with the next step that was supposed to be taken, which is move from agricultural economy into what we would call the secondary sectors, right? Like industry, production, and so forth. And Philippines have really struggled with that, not least because they're an archipelagic state, which is a bit difficult to build necessary infrastructure in order to have a big industrial base. And this is, of course, still a problem. What the Philippines then did was they sort of tried to leapfrog that state and move into the tertiary economy, into services pretty quickly, and it worked reasonably well. You have a well-educated, English-speaking, very bubbly. The Filipinos are very bubbly, very outspoken, yeah, very un-Asian in that sense, yeah, in the best possible sense. Very forthright, very great social personalities, and they moved into these business outsourcing services. The problem is that you're now in a situation where, well, let's be quite honest, AI can do that better than any human in 5 years from now, right? So the question is really, what is your next step of growth? And this is what the Philippines has not yet figured out, right? So here we are going forward. I know I'm out of time, Jason. Just give me a couple of minutes more to point out a couple of upside and downside risks that I think are very important. One is, of course, we are now coming down, and this is true for Australia as much as for Southeast Asia. We are now coming down from a not hyperinflation, but certainly from a relatively high inflation point, a relatively malign inflationary environment after the COVID pandemic. We have come down quite aggressively, and the central banks in Southeast Asia have been somewhat reluctant to embrace this environment and be aggressive with their accommodation of more positive interest rates. Yeah? Yes, positive for growth, of course. So, but we have seen interest rates coming down quite substantially across Southeast Asia. So now, in fact, we are in a situation where inflation is probably not the biggest threat anymore. It's probably fair to say. In fact, we are probably on the side of we have to take a bit of caution with regards to deflation going forward, but that's a different topic. Be this as it may, interest rates have come down quite aggressively, which does, of course, miracles for an economy, at least for a short while. Nonetheless, you have to bear in mind that central banks and interest rates are a bit like a runway. At some point, you run out of the runway, and if the economy doesn't take off by then, you're in big, deep trouble, and you have to do some kind of a Donkey Kong, goofy economics like quantitative easing or something like that, in order to accommodate the end of the runway. So I just spoke about, and I think this is very, very important, particularly here as you are looking at Singapore and speaking about Malaysia, is the special economic zone. And a lot of people were a bit sarcastic about the special economic zone. I was talking about it for quite a while, and then it was inked in January, and people were like, doesn't really matter that much, it's not going to happen. Well, I was right. It does take off. So the figures, we saw the figures for Q1 and Q2, and investment in Malaysia has, in Johor specifically, which is the southernmost state of Malaysia, where the special economic zone is located, right at the border with Singapore across the coastline. Yeah. And Johor has moved up immediately, becoming the fastest growing state in Malaysia, and in fact has attracted 25% of all investment into Malaysia went into Johor, which, by the way, creates all sorts of domestic political problems among the sultans in Malaysia, but that's a different topic altogether. But Johor is now a really strong growing economy, and you can see this special economic zone going forward as a very potential upside, a potentially very strong upside risk going forward for 2026, 2027, and of course, much beyond. And I urge you to look into it. Another one that I think is very important to point out, and again, I will share this with you if you're interested. I just point out a couple. I think this one is quite an important one as well. If you have traveled to Southeast Asia for quite a while, and you, let's say, would have been to Bangkok or Manila or Jakarta, say 20 years ago, and you would have returned back now, you would see it, of course, completely transformed. And of course, it's correct for all of us. I don't think I'm revealing anything new when I say that urbanization has been a magical, transformative in Southeast Asia over the past 20 years. Important to point out, and this is what people often don't realize, is we have not yet reached the urbanization ceiling at all. We are still urbanizing, perhaps except Singapore, perhaps. But across the ASEAN 6, minus Singapore, urbanization is still growing strong, and urbanization does do miracles for a growing economy, right? It creates middle classes. It unlocks all sorts of businesses, right? Chemical industry, services industry, all sorts, right? So construction industry, of course. So we still haven't reached the urbanization ceiling in Southeast Asia just yet. Last point, Jason, I promise. So what Donald Trump has certainly achieved is, according to our calculation, is he has not shrunk trade overall. He has just managed to shrunk to shrink trade with the United States, which is quite a different category, yes? So if trade continues to take place, then where does it go? And what do you do in order to attract getting a share of this, right? And so what you need to do, and this is something that I would predict going forward quite strongly for Southeast Asia, is that you have really two things where Southeast Asia has relatively low-hanging fruits to pick on terms of trade. One is trade liberalization within ASEAN. ASEAN trade within the ASEAN economies sits somewhere just north of 20%, which is ridiculously low, given how strong the middle classes are in Southeast Asia and what a big economy we could be as a unified economy. Right? The European Union, not that I want to compare, but just for a figure, for a reference point perhaps, has something around 70% of all trade is taking place internally, right? So there is room for growth here. What needs to happen is that you need to reduce what we would call non-tariff trade barriers, right? Different regulations and so forth that constitute, in all but name, essentially barriers to trade, right? So the other one is FTAs rolling out, and this is something that has been taking place quite progressively. And the most difficult one, and with this I finish this, and the most difficult one is with the European Union. The European Union is notoriously difficult to come to a free trade agreement with, because their standards are so incredibly high and they have so many demands. And so the main difference between Europeans and Asians is, in Asia what we do is we just do stuff and we figure out the rest later. We just start and do stuff, and then stuff pops up and then we solve it. And if we can't solve it, we shelve it for a while and we pretend it doesn't exist, and we get it off the shelf at a later stage. But that's good, that's how Americans do business too. That's doing stuff. The Europeans, unfortunately, always need to have everything perfect before they even start, right? So everything needs to be negotiated to the very last detail before they even start implementing. So now, Donald Trump has worked miracles on European bureaucracy, which I'm very happy to announce, which is that they are now much more accommodative of particular Asian circumstances, which perhaps in many ways cannot meet the high standards of the European Union, or doesn't want to meet the standards of the European Union because we do not agree with them culturally. So what has happened is now that we have magically an agreement on, for example, a free trade agreement with Indonesia, which was in the negotiation for over 10 years, I think. And now suddenly, after April 2, we were able to conclude it, right? So therefore, what you can see now is a situation where everybody is so much more interested in rolling out free trade, minus the United States, that you can see a proliferation of free trade going. So here, my prediction going forward is watch for much more intra-Asian trade, that's within ASEAN, but within Asia generally, and much more Eurasian trade as well, going forward as well. So thank you very much. Sorry, Jason, I went a bit over time, but if there is anyone who wants to ask a specific question, I'm of course here to...
Do you have 5 minutes?
Yeah, I have 5 minutes, of course, if you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, we do.
If there is anyone who wants to... Sorry, I didn't give you much chance to intercept me.
So, Fred, huge thanks. Thanks very much for that. We always give you a hard brief. There's so much data and so much information that you want to share, and it's entertaining as well. Well, we've got Fred for another 5 minutes, so if anyone has any specific questions, there's a lot there to digest. And we do have the slides as well, so we'll happily share those. I'm like you, I take photos every time I go to these things, but I always get the slides later. So any questions for Fred?
First of all, amazing green socks.
Homer Simpson's on it,
man. My question is, with the tariffs on China, why are they? What's going on there? Because you imagine that the GDP would decrease, but
so I didn't speak too much about China because it was predominantly about Southeast Asia, but because you're asking, I'm happy to elaborate a bit on it. So what happened really is that China is a lot more resilient than the Americans perhaps thought, and to some extent, and I know Australia is a bit different because your trade relations with China are pretty tight, which does create its own problems in other ways. But in any case, specifically the Europeans and the Americans, there is very, 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 very little, and this is even putting it diplomatic, knowledge on China. On the Chinese economy is predominantly led by misinformation. If you speak to Europeans and Americans from Washington or Brussels about the Chinese economy, you would think they're talking about an entirely different place because the knowledge is very, very limited. Therefore, they have grossly overestimated their leverage over China. What has really happened is that for the past, since 2017 and since 2018, if you remember the first so-called phase 1 deal that China struck with the United States on trade, is that China realized pretty quickly in the first Trump administration that they are not going to go back to the good old days of early 2000s where they can export freely pretty much in the United States as much as they want. So what happened is this, that they have used the past, 8-9 years or so to not gradually, but very proactively diversifying away from the United States. In fact, China does not even trade that much anymore with the United States compared to many of the Southeast Asian economies, right? So Vietnam trades substantially more with the United States in terms of overall, not in nominal figures, of course, but in terms of the overall trade volume and as part of GDP with the United States than China does. China does not trade with the United States so much anymore, and therefore they were actually relatively mildly impacted by this. Another one is that China does export some stuff that cannot be bought anywhere else. So therefore, the United States will still buy it, and importers will still import it. And they have to pay the tariffs, of course. That means inflation is going to go up in the United States, but so be it, right? That's something they brought on themselves. So China does have a lot of products that will be bought in the United States, at least for now, no matter what, right? So that's another one. And the third one probably is that China is a mature economy. China is a very mature economy in the sense that it does not depend on external demand by the United States for its economic growth. It has all sorts of various, and yes, it has problems in the property sector, but all advanced economies have problems in various sectors, right? The question is, can you have the right policies in order to manage those? So China does have a relatively well-balanced economy overall. So therefore, growth is actually pretty strong. And this is something that the Southeast Asian economies do not have to that extent. Again, except the few, perhaps Malaysia and Singapore, because they are not that mature yet, right? Not that wealthy yet. And the final point is that China, and they haven't even started to really open the coffers yet, have much more fiscal room than many other people, especially in the Western world, realize. So if China wants to maneuver themselves out of potential economic malaise with fiscal policies, they can. They haven't even started yet. There is a lot of money they could potentially spend on this. They could probably fiscal policy themselves out of economic trouble for the next 2 decades. Yeah, so pretty bullish on China.
Question specifically about technology growth in Southeast Asia, because a lot of the charts are generic. But do you have an opinion about technology growth, especially within Southeast Asia?
Yeah, what technology specifically talking about?
AI, software.
Of course, yeah. So so AI. I mean, the AI story in Southeast Asia is really two things, right? It's semiconductors and data centers, right? And data centers is something that is a bit of a blessing and a curse at the same time. So why is it a blessing? It is a blessing because it does, of course, bring a lot of FDI into Southeast Asia, specifically Malaysia. Again, we're going back to the Johor. Is one of the main investment opportunities there really is data centers, right? And they're being rolled out very, very actively. And a lot around data centers, you of course have a secondary economy as well of construction, suppliers of aluminium and so forth, right? So these things do bring, of course, economic growth. The curse of it is, I mean, for one, they don't really create a lot of jobs, which is specifically in Malaysia very, very needed. High-paying jobs, yes, but very, very few, first of all. And the other one is, of course, they need an enormous amount of energy. And unfortunately, in Southeast Asia, pardon my French, but we suck at the energy transition. Right? So in Southeast Asia, as much as we like to talk about our energy transition, the vast majority of our electricity comes from coal. And this hasn't changed over the past 20 years. So if you look at a coal chart, where how much coal is being used, you will see that with an enormous rise in electricity consumption, the usage of coal, the share of coal has actually stayed steady, which means we have increased our coal consumption very, very significantly over the past 20 years rather than bringing it down, right? So our energy transition is not going well, regardless of what politicians like to say. I'm afraid that we will spectacularly fail for most economies, our net zero targets, I'm afraid. So Singapore is, of course, a very specific place, a very different situation from the rest of Southeast Asia, but this is something, for example, that we need to think about data centers, right? So real estate and technology companies investing in being very, very bullish on data center here. Semiconductor industry is something, again, that Malaysia, Vietnam specifically are very interested in. And Malaysia, again, has a bit of an advantage there because they have been in the semiconductor space for quite a long time, though I guess at the lower end of the value chain, right, and the packaging and testing of semiconductors. What they're trying to do is they're trying to move up the value chain and really start moving into design and production of semiconductors. This is a long process, of course. It's a very highly specialized activity, but yeah, taking place definitely there. So in general, I would say here in Southeast Asia, what you will find is you will find a very digitally savvy population. So even our seniors in Singapore are very, very savvy compared to the rest of the world in using digital devices, right, on their phone. It's very common for elderly people even to use this. So if elderly people are very digitally savvy, then you can of course imagine what our young people are doing. Yeah? So it's very easy to adopt here generally. This is not just for Singapore. This is across Southeast Asia to adopt, to build apps, to build startups that rely entirely on the digital economy, for example. The downside of it is that we have a large employment in the gig economy, which does of course create social problems down the line, but that's a different topic. So generally I'm very bullish again on the technology sector here, but with limitations, and the limitations are of course that these things take time. They take time and money to develop generally. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Fred before we say goodbye? Anyone?
What's your favorite beer?
What's my what?
What's your favorite beer?
My favorite beer? Oh, that's in Southeast Asia or generally?
Generally.
Well, I'm German, right? So my favorite beer is definitely German. I think it's, I'm a lager kind of guy. Like the IPA makes me a bit more. So I'm a lager kind of guy. Veltins, check it out, Veltins, German beer from the region where I come from. Great question.
All right.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thanks
Thank you
very
for
much.
listening to me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. So, what I'd like to do for this session is, we have 45 minutes, but you'll see my team throughout the entire day. My name is Erza. We have Suyin. Suyin covers the Malaysian and Thai markets. She's actually Malaysian. We have YY is Singaporean, but she covers the Indonesia and Filipino markets. Vanessa, more specifically, she covers the Filipino, Malaysia. She covers the financial services. And we have Priya at the back as well. So it's not just me today. They will be with you, I think, throughout the day. And please feel free to ask questions. You'll be meeting them at the event tomorrow as well. You'll be bumping into them. And what I'd like to emphasize, I think you've heard very positive things from both Nyla as well as Dr. Fred about Southeast Asia. Macroeconomic data is very, very important, but why I'm here, I think, is to give you an idea about how I look at business. And why do I say that? Because I've been in Southeast Asia. I was born and bred in, I was born in Singapore, lived in Indonesia for 7 years. I started out my career in 2007. Those of you young enough would probably know the company Lehman Brothers, biggest bankruptcy in the world. So today my team will be all about failure and how to avoid it. Hopefully you'll learn from some of mine. I started an industry platform in 2012, so we've run this company for the past 13 years, and we primarily cover Southeast Asian markets. So Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. So emerging markets like Myanmar, we used to be quite involved in until the junta took over in 2019 and COVID put a stop to that. We haven't come back. Cambodia is a very interesting market that we are not part of yet. But primarily those markets, I think, are things that are interesting to us. And just a little bit of introduction about who I am, just so you get a context about what I'm saying and where I'm coming from. What I like to think of myself is, I like to think of myself as a business operator in Southeast Asia, right? Industry platform is a 100% private company. It's owned by myself and 2 partners. I sit on the board of a VC out of India, the Together Fund. If you are familiar with Girish, he started Freshworks, the largest, I think it was a decacorn listed on NASDAQ, so he started a fund post-IPO. And on top of that, I personally, as a company as well, we have portfolio companies that we invest in, and our primary focus are B2B technology companies who can scale in Southeast Asian markets. Why do we do that? No, not because we have a lot of capital. If you understand, most of you raising funds from VCs, you understand the power law basics. The premise of the power law is VCs, they look for, I don't know, 1 in 10, 1 in 20, maybe 1 in 30 successes, but a 1 in 10, 1 in 20 would give you 100x, 50x, right? We don't have that sort of capital, so we try to operate with B2B companies who have a reasonably higher chance of success, so we look at maybe a 25 to 50% chance of success. So if you look at these companies, Magnify and Vimera, and you will hear about them a little bit later about how we help them scale in this part of the world. And what I will tell you, everything that I'm telling you today that industry platform does, you can do it yourself. So think about it from a, I don't know, washing your car. You can wash your own car yourself, but once in a while it's nice to pay someone to wash that car for you because maybe you have other things to do. So the primary focus here, and I don't know why this keeps switching. I'm sorry, let's ignore this, we'll get this fixed. But again, the primary focus today and over the next 2 days is to think about how Southeast Asia maybe is a potential market for your business, right? And that's what we're going to go through. So a bit of overview about our firm as well. We spend most of our time, most of our companies 90% of our revenue comes from helping B2B technology companies, and I put them into two main buckets. One would be large tech. You see all these names, you recognize them, you know them. And the other one would be what we classify as startups. But startups come in all shapes and sizes. You have seed companies from this part of the world, or even you have companies who were new to this part of the world. So we were, when CrowdStrike first started in Southeast Asia, we were helping them. When Hootsuite started in Southeast Asia, Twilio started in Southeast Asia, we helped them with their business expansion in this part of the world. But they would fall under the startup category. So we kind of look at things in this dichotomy, whereby we either put you into a large tech bucket or into a startup bucket. Right? And why we do that is generally because go-to-market strategies should be different depending on your scale, depending on how much money you want to spend. How much money you want to spend on paying people to wash your car and washing your car yourself, right? So what I understand, and this is something that's very, very important to me. This was actually said to me by a CRO of an American company, which eventually got bought out for close to 4 billion. They were trying to expand in Asia, and she was telling me that for American firms, expanding into Asia is like playing computer games in the hardest setting. And that's generally what I see to be true. And it's not easy. It's not easy when you hear about the positives that's happening in this part of the world. But what we try to do is we try to just de-risk that difficulty for you. And we'll show you how we potentially try to do it. All of you are familiar with this, right? I looked at the list of people who are here today. Most of you are founders, CTOs, so product people. You probably don't think too highly of salespeople, especially in this era of product-led growth. But I'll tell you something, if you are doing B2B, if you are doing targeting Southeast Asia, the easiest entry point is to look at things from a traditional B2B market development model, right? So stage one, awareness. I'm going to assume for most of you, Southeast Asia, Singapore is a very, very new market for you. So there's almost no awareness of companies to your brand. But similarly, more important, I think, there's almost no awareness of you to the conglomerates, to the companies that operate in this part of the world. So awareness comes both ways. A, you have to start identifying which companies you want to go after, what kind of segments you want to go after. You have to start understanding the local markets, the scenes, the individuals, the ICPs and the buyer personas. And then eventually initial contact, which is what's going to happen tomorrow, or even tonight at the networking, or even right now. You're going to start speaking to people, and I think the commissioner made a very good point about the value proposition that you speak about. In Singapore, it's all about ROI. What can I do for you? How can I increase your revenue? How can I save you some cost? But in the rest of Southeast Asia, it's a bit different. You know what Dr. Fred said just now? In Indonesia, we have this saying, tidak apa. Tidak apa basically translates to, never mind. Oh, my internet is broken. In Singapore, we need to get the internet up in the next 2 minutes. But in Indonesia, oh, it's okay, I'll go for coffee. And maybe when I come back, the internet will figure itself out. So culturally, it's just very, very different in different markets in this part of the world. And that is something I think a lot of people undervalue when they're speaking to different people from different parts of the region. But having said that, I'm going to assume most of you fall into the lower quadrant, whereby you're trying to develop new markets with either new products or existing products. And this market development framework, effectively, the more you go to the right or down, the riskier and more difficult it becomes. So we'll give you some examples about how things should be looked at, right? So what I always tell people or startups who come into this part of the world, not even just startups, when I look at even big tech who's coming into this part of the world, they usually come to me with this problem statements. You know, I would like to speak to an audience of C-level people. I need 10,000 leads to put into my CRM, and then my SDRs will start calling them. A lot of them love speaking at conferences and events, which is great branding, which is great exposure, but it doesn't work anymore. The way the world works right now, it just doesn't work. And more or less, when I speak to CROs or head of marketing, they just want revenue. I need pipeline, I need deals to come through, I need paid POCs. Yes, these are all final goals, but I don't think these are things you should be focusing on, right? If we start looking at awareness and we start looking at complexities of hierarchies in this part of the world, so one thing that's very, very clear that's different from here to other developed markets is the way companies are structured. There are a lot of conglomerates, there are a lot of joint ownerships, there are a lot of cross-holdings. So a conglomerate might own maybe a bank, a retail company, a manufacturing company, and maybe an energy company, an electricity provider, and it all falls under a single conglomerate. So traditional finance teaches you that, you know, to unlock value for shareholders, you need to be very, very specific with your business. So an electric company should be run as an electric company, but that's not how it works in Indonesia, in Philippines, in Malaysia as well. So let's start with a simple example of a company I think we're all familiar with, the Singtel Group. Right, I think Optus was in the news for a while the last 2 weeks in Australia, not for very good reasons, but the Singtel Group, Singtel is a Singaporean company. Optus is one of their subsidiaries, but what you will notice as well is they own 2 or 3 other subsidiaries in Southeast Asia. So if you're already doing something with Optus, to get a referral into the Singtel Group might not be that hard, and that might be your first entry point, right? One similarity between Australian economic makeup versus Southeast Asia is very clear. Your largest market cap companies, if you are a B2B firm, is your banks and your energy companies. Southeast Asia is not that different. The largest market cap firms in this part of the world are also banks and energy companies. So if you have solutions for something that you've done in Australia, within the banking, within the financial services, or even within the energy space, translating that into Singapore or Southeast Asia would not be that difficult, because your case studies, what you've done, the pain points you've helped solve for your clients in Australia would apply in this part of the world as well. Now, we'll go into something a little bit more complex, right? So Tenaga Nasional Berhad. Anybody familiar with this thing? No? It's Malaysia's state electricity company, right? I think it's roughly a $14 billion entity. They run their own data centers, they run their own AI models, they run their own LLMs. So similar, right? When you look, but this is a pseudo government entity. Right, and in approaching companies like this, and you will find this everywhere in Southeast Asia, right? A similar company in Indonesia would be PLN. PLN is not even listed, and every 3 years, I'm saying this behind closed doors, there's no recordings, every 3 or 4 years, the director or the heads of PLN would be arrested for corruption, and there'll be a new leader. This is how the markets work in this part of the world. I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm not putting judgment on it, but things just work a little bit differently when you're trying to approach government agencies outside of Singapore. In Singapore, it's very, very transparent, right? GovTech runs almost all the deals for technology. But in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, in Philippines, for example, electricity distribution is done by different states, by different areas, what they call local government units. So again, a little bit of difference when it comes to how you approach pseudo or government-owned entities. And then this is where it's most interesting. So this is part of a conglomerate where, as I mentioned, this is Astra International out of Indonesia. There's joint ownership with some Jardine in Singapore and some Hong Kong entity as well. So you will find a lot of cross-shareholdings between Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, and Hong Kong, right? And you will find, this is all in Indonesia, but let me quickly translate for you. The numbers on the top are the revenue contributions in rupiah, and the different pillars are just the different segments or verticals that they are involved in. So for this Astra International, they are very big into automotive because they have joint ventures with almost every Japanese manufacturer in Indonesia. You know, Indonesia is a very local domestic market, right? In order for you to sell iPhones in Indonesia, you have to manufacture your iPhones in Indonesia. iPhones were banned in Indonesia for a short while. So Toyota, Honda, Daihatsu, they work together with Astra to manufacture cars onshore. BYD is building a massive factory there as well. So that contributes 9.7 trillion of the total revenues. And then there's financial services, construction, agriculture, infrastructure, technology, and property. One thing you'll find is that Indonesia is pretty similar to English, right? Because if you read out the words, they'll give you the language that you're trying to see. So when you approach companies like Astra, you'll have to be very, very clear which part of the company you are approaching. Above all these individual subsidiaries, you have a chief digital officer and a chief, usually a CIO. But each of these subsidiaries will have their own CDOs or even CIOs. So if you're trying to sell technology solutions, you have to be a little bit clever with understanding who are the companies you're trying to look out for, because Astra Automotive does not equal to Astra Property, for example. And almost every conglomerate has a property arm because we love our property in this part of the world. Makes us rich. And similar, you look at the individual subsidiaries, they will also have their own head of ITs or CIOs, right? So just keep that in mind when you're speaking to people over the next few days. Just A, try to recognize the company, and then B, try to recognize the person you're speaking to. I understand, I hope most of you understand this concept, the ICP and BP, right? So I'm not going to go through this. Why I put this here is because I'm going to explain a process for what we did for some of our clients. and I'm going to use these terms quite a bit. So I looked through the companies who are part of this program today, and man, you guys are such a diverse bunch. So in terms of growth stages, in terms of solutions, in terms of products and services you provide, it's very diverse. So I had to pick case studies that I felt were relevant to almost all of you. So I picked 2 case studies. The first one that I'm going to look at would be, and again, all of you are looking at new markets, so that's what I'm going to focus on. So the first company we looked at was actually a very, very advanced company. They were, when they came into this part of the world, they had revenues of over $100 million, valuation of over $1 billion. And they effectively had to build out the entire sales and marketing capabilities in Southeast Asia in a very, very short period of time. So they built out that sales and marketing team. I think they had full-time employees of 8, main office in Singapore. So remember this, right? When you think of Singapore, there's a lot of misconception about Singapore. We run this program we run an accelerator program for Korean companies, for Taiwanese companies, as well as for Singaporean companies. And I recently sat down with a bunch of 15 CEOs from Korea, fairly advanced Korean companies, right? So most of the CEOs, the startup in Korea, the startup CEOs are usually more mature. So it's usually a second career. They have PhDs, they're in their 40s. And I asked 15 of them, how many of you know which is the biggest market in Southeast Asia? And 7 out of 15 of them said Singapore. And that's not correct, right? Singapore is only a small part of the Southeast Asian market, and even Singapore brands itself as a launchpad for the rest of Southeast Asia. So when you start thinking about doing business in Singapore, do not exclude the rest of Southeast Asia. That's one thing I would say, right? And this is exactly what this company did. It's a Swiss company. They started their office in Singapore, but they wanted to scale throughout the rest of Southeast Asia. And they built up a team of 8 people, and as a private company, their main focus was top-line revenue growth. Why top-line revenue growth? Gives you higher multiples, your exit comes in a couple of years, you're golden, right? So what they did effectively was they compared the markets between Switzerland and Southeast Asia, and here we have some comparison, and this is something you should do for yourself, for your current markets. And this is effectively what we did for them across 12-month cycle, right? Identification of ICTs and BTs. All of you can do this yourself. Go to almost any website, download, maybe if you are targeting enterprises, look at them by sector, look at them by industry classification, get a list of companies by market size and value, go to LinkedIn and find your BPs. Very, very simple. You don't need us to do it for you, right? Define USPs, and then start looking into what are the kind of technology solutions these companies are looking to invest in. This is all readily available in all the annual reports. You can feed these reports into GPT, and again, I'm giving you like a playbook for you to do this yourself. Feed it into GPT and tell you to summarize all their technology investments over the last few years and who has been responsible for it. You cross-check the information with, say, readily available third-party software, like maybe like LinkedIn Sales Navigator if you have it, or some pretty good software that you can use like ZoomInfo. Are any of you using any of this lead generation tools? Yeah, ZoomInfo, and there's this new one which was pretty good as well for Southeast Asia. I'll give you the entire list later on. So for this specific account, what they did was from April 22 to April 23, so 1 year time frame. This is effectively what they did. And how they use us is effectively how you're going to use trade shows. A common mistake I find for most startups when it comes to thinking about how to use trade shows is they think of it as a one-off. Don't do that. Don't do that, right? You'll be spending a lot of time over the next 2 days meeting a lot of different people. The trade show you're going to is actually quite international. You meet people from the region as well. And I promise you, 60% of the emails that you shoot out to these people after that will not get you a reply. Don't stop. Have some cadence. 2 weeks later, send them another email. 3 weeks later, send them another email. And maybe if they don't get back to you within like a month, then that's where maybe you can stop. Because that's the way it should be, right? The way that we look at things is you should have a multi-touch and omni-channel approach. So use WhatsApp. Everybody in Southeast Asia uses WhatsApp. So if you get a mobile number, don't be ashamed to send them a WhatsApp message. Don't be afraid to send them an email. Don't be afraid to call them once in a while. Okay? So what we did for this company was we just used the different channels that is proprietary to us. So we have a network here in Southeast Asia ourselves, whereby we identified ICPs, VPs, we put them into different tiers, and over the next 1 year, we targeted them using many, many different channels. And we use conferences, we use roundtables, we use workshops. So generally what Southeast Asian companies like is for you to offer them education. And I'm not saying it's not because they're not educated. You have guys like NVIDIA, Microsoft offering them education, but if you can offer them a workshop whereby, hey, you know what, there's this esoteric topic that I know something very much about, you can get 5 or 6 of your top guys to come and listen to what this topic is about, and it can be an online session, or people like it to be done physically as well. So that's a tactic that has worked very, very well for us, and what effectively happens is we need to introduce who they are, what they do, what potentially problems they can solve, which is the top 1 or 2 USPs, and continuously across the next 1 year, continuously meet with them, speak with different teams. So understand the cross holdings that I mentioned earlier. You might speak with a CIO who might refer you to a head of IT, who might refer you to another subsidiary, who then might refer you to their finance officer to get procurement stuff done. In Philippines, procurement is a pain. You literally need physical copies of invoices, which means that you need to get approval as a vendor, and they will speak to 3 or 4 of your different clients. You need to submit physical submissions of your incorporation documents, your shareholding documents. You need to queue up at the tax office to get an invoice slip. So yes, digitalization is happening in Southeast Asia, but these are things that I don't want you to be surprised about. But if you get a deal, it's worth it, because once you sign on as a vendor for one of these Philippines conglomerates, you're there for a long time, right? So what I'm saying is spend a lot of time to invest. It is very, very difficult. And you've got to be very, very careful about allocation of resources internally from your companies. So Singapore is a great place to start, but if you're going to go into Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, have some bandwidth available, resources available, some slack available that you can commit over maybe a 3, 6, 9 month period, especially if you're in the B2B space. Sales cycle a bit longer here. There will be a lot of negotiations. They are very, very price sensitive. So make sure if you want to invest in this part of the world that you have some bandwidth, or as mentioned earlier, you have very, very good local partners. And you will be meeting some people at lunch, you'll be meeting some people over the next 2 days who will be able to help you handle all these headaches, obviously in exchange for some percentage of your revenue, right? That's how partnership works. And this is another, so I looked at a $1 billion company, and this is another company that we took an equity stake in, so which means we got in very early as an investor in this company. And this is the company, I can say transparently, it's Wimera. You can go look up their website. So this was previously a services company out of India who wanted to expand their business in Southeast Asia. But they were effectively personnel staff augmentation company. So they provided IT personnel to work in large conglomerates in India. But in doing that, they had learned quite a little bit about how conglomerates operated, and they started creating products under the same company. So they incorporated in Singapore just after COVID. So their total revenue before they came to Singapore was less than $1 million, and there were only 2 people in Singapore, and they weren't necessarily salespeople, right? But they were business development people. That's what I would call them. And they only had offices. They only had a single office in Singapore, with 2 of them shuttling through the rest of Southeast Asia. And what we decided for them to do was they had this solution that they wanted to target factories with CNC machines. So Astra, for example, was a great example for them, right? So each factory might have anywhere between, for a small scale factory, 10 to 15 machines, but large factories might have up to 300 machines. And their revenue model was to charge per machine, right? To get data from the machine for preventive maintenance. So what they effectively did was, ASEAN was a manufacturing hub. Roughly 20% of our GDP is contributed by manufacturing, right? Whether it's semiconductor, high-value manufacturing, to like food manufacturing, or even auto parts manufacturing. ASEAN is a manufacturing hub. So this, why we took equity in them was, we thought it would be almost a no-brainer to do this, right? There were so many factories to go after, the market was wide enough. So what we did was we went out, multi-touch approach, aimed to get a POC. Just show of hands here, how many of you do free POCs here? 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you don't mind me asking, how many percent, are you aware of the percentage conversion of your free POCs? Anybody? 100. Wow. Yourself? No?
We've moved away from free POCs.
Yeah,
because of
so and yourself, if you don't mind me asking?
30 to 40.
30 to 40%. So in Southeast Asia, there's this POC problem whereby because POCs are free and people are price sensitive, they'll be like, hey, you know what, I'll do a POC. Yeah. And then you invest time, you invest money, you invest resource support, and the deals get dragged on. But having said that, this is why I say you need a lot of stamina. Because if you maintain that, eventually the deals will convert, but it might take some time. So have the patience. If you're going to take a free POC approach in this part of the world, have some patience. And the value of face is very, very important. You need to be present to speak to their bosses, and then you'll speak to a procurement guy, and then you'll speak to those. Give a presentation to their board, they'll be ding-donging for a few months, right? So, but this is what this guys did. Two of them, they were really hungry, they kept flying into Indonesia, they kept flying into Malaysia, and let me just show you the outcomes, right? So this is what we did on an activity side. This was a 2-year cycle. Why? Because we had equity in this company and we had skin in the game as well. And these were outcomes. Outcomes meaning the first POC they got roughly 6 months after we started working with them, and they got their first new logo by the end of the year. It was a small deal. I think it was a $300,000 deal. And then eventually what they did was they set up an office with the support of MDEC in Malaysia. For those, I believe there's an office in KL as well. So Victoria might be very, very familiar with MDEC. And they did a media launch with 7 customers at the end of the 2nd year. So they had 7 customers by the end of year 2. So by the end of year 2, the revenue contribution from Southeast Asia had surpassed the revenue contributions from India. So having said that, I'm not going to go to this yet. Having said that, I have quite a bit of time left, do I, Jason? So these might seem like success stories, but I'll tell you a little bit a twist to the tale. So this company, I think they were doing 1.52 million within 18 months out of Southeast Asia, but they eventually folded. Why? Because there was some problem with payments that they had that they couldn't resolve, and their cash for this part of the world eventually dried up. So what the investors decided to do was they decided to fold the company and then start a new company, which is going to be 100% product driven. So product driven meaning they found a way to productize their services and to make it packaged very nicely, whereby companies in this part of the world get to decide, hey, I'm going to buy this package and it's going to be a commitment for 6 to 9, 12 months. So they're in the second iteration of their business. And the first company I mentioned, the Swiss company, I think they had a massive restructuring, but this is what most companies do, right? Pre-IPO, you restructure your headcount in different parts of the world, you keep your top line revenue, you get the financials ready for an IPO and it looks nice, your margins improve a little bit. So what they did was they pulled up a lot of markets in Southeast Asia, they downsized their ASEAN team, and I think they're preparing for an IPO. But this has happened many times. It happened with Twilio, it happened with Hootsuite in this part of the world, pre-IPO as well. So, positive stories. You take the spin you want out of this, but what I'm trying to say is that Southeast Asia, I think, if you want to look at investing in Southeast Asia, you need to have a longer horizon. Unless you're going to do it with a very, very good local partner. And that's something I usually tell people, finding local partners. So when we work with the Korean and Taiwanese companies, they are so entrenched in the idea of finding channel partners. They will run programs 100% to find channel partners. But the problem with finding channel partners here is you do not want to be competing with the Koreans and the Taiwanese. Why? The Koreans are paying up to 60 to 70% of their revenues on the first few deals that the channel partners get. So it's a bit, you don't want to be competing on price. So what I generally advise most companies coming into this part of the world is find your first end client yourself. Find a big brand name, find a conglomerate, find an enterprise, find a company, your client yourself, and then take that to a channel partner. Because then there's something on the table already for them. Versus speaking to someone and saying, hey, you know what, can you distribute my products for me? Everybody will say yes. They'll sign an MOU, an agreement with you, and then they'll just not work on distributing your products. That's the unfortunate truth, right? So over the next 2 days, yes, meet the channel partners, meet your distributors, meet your resellers, but at the same time, try to get a lay of the land in terms of the enterprises who might actually be interested, B2B direct buyers who might be interested in your solutions as well. Okay, and same thing, we provide a lot of free resources. So you will get this presentation. If you scan, you'll get information around different companies, different setups in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand. We do an annual survey of roughly 1,000 CIOs in the region, CIOs and CEOs, C-level professionals, about their IT technology spending budgets, their expected ROIs, what kind of technology they're looking for. And we have a network as well. So if you read through these pages, you'll find certain information about certain people that you can then go on LinkedIn and message them yourself, right? So as I mentioned from the start, I run a company myself, and I think about efficacy of the money you're spending, right? And I think that's the biggest problem for most companies. So a lot of these things you can do yourself. You can build it in-house, you can work with different platforms, work with different technology tools, even though you're based out of Australia, right? As long as you're willing to, well, I guess wake up a little bit earlier, because Australia is 3 hours ahead, right? Yeah. So it's not that hard. It just needs consistency. It just needs some time to actually see it through, right? We still have 15 minutes, and this is where things get interesting, where I will answer any questions you might have. Does anybody have any questions?
You mentioned that you were going to focus on helping us to not fail.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the recurring failures? You touched on some of them, but some of the other recurring failures that you see people entering this market make?
Recurring failures?
Or mistakes?
Generally, I think it brings me back to that conversation with that CRO, right? A playbook out of the US does not work in this part of the world, right? And that playbook can be, Dr. Fred mentioned it for a bit just now when he said the Filipinos, they are a bit more upmarket, they are a bit more cheerful, the Indonesians are a certain way. So you need to find a new playbook. You cannot come into this part of the world with an old playbook, right? That discovery process, what I find for a lot of large companies, they tend to skip that step. Meaning, I'm not going to discover how this is done. I have a playbook, I'm bringing it here. My sales cycle in Australia or in the US is maybe POC is 3 months, and then after that procurement will take you 1 month, and then the deal will happen at the end of month number 9, and revenue should scale by 1.5 every year. Like, that playbook doesn't work there, right? It's very, very, when it comes to investment, you need to invest a lot of time for that initial deal. And what I would suggest is be a little bit, and all of you have different products. I don't know which product you're referring to, but be a little bit more realistic when it comes to especially sales cycles. Because results will come. It is one of the fastest growing regions in the world. Investments are actually really, really high. When we speak to CIOs, they are spending more and more money every year. Even during COVID, investment spending by the largest conglomerates in the world, in Southeast Asia, was increasing at a clip of about 20%. So there is money to be spent. The question comes around to whether A, you're patient enough, and B, how long can you wait it out, I guess. Yeah. So that would be the primary thing. The second thing would be face-to-face. That's a very, very big thing that needs to be done in this part of the world. Singapore, even Singapore, I would say, right? Like face-to-face meetings. Let me go back to the example. This example. So the guy who ran this company, he was zero brand awareness. They had zero revenues. Nobody knew what they were doing. But he had a development team out of India, right? So, but the guy in Southeast Asia, what he would do is he would travel non-stop. He was out of the country maybe 26 out of 30 days per month. And he was traveling into Malaysia, Indonesia, primary markets they were looking at. So face-to-face interactions are really, really important. So that's something you need to think about. Either you're going to do it yourself, or you need a partner to do it for you, right? And that's same thing, right? It's a question of what kind of investments you want to make. Either I do it myself, or I pay someone, and partners are not going to do it for you without potential revenue. So which is why my biggest advice always is to try to find 1 or 2 end users first before trying to build up the channel ecosystem. Because otherwise you're just competing with the Koreans and the Taiwanese and the Europeans who are saying, I'll give you 20%, 30%, 40%, 60%, and they'll all just sit on the products and not do anything, unless an RFP comes in which happens to suit what they want. So try to build good channel partners, meaning, and even if you're channel partners, you need to spend time with them. You need to either tell them, hey, I'm going to do a co-marketing fund with you to help you scale, or one strategy that I think has worked is hiring a dedicated salesperson with your partner, which means you pay part or most of that person's salary to focus on your product. And that's the best thing about Southeast Asia, by the way. Correct me if I'm wrong, average graduate salaries in Australia are something like 60, 70,000 Aussie per year. Yeah. Anybody want to guess what the average salary is in, take a country, Malaysia?
Less than?
Obviously less.
30%.
30% less?
I think 10, 15 grand.
10, 15 grand US? AU? Roughly that, yeah. And Dr. Fred mentioned the Singapore Economic Zone. So the Singapore companies are very, very interested in it. Why? Cheaper rental, cheaper labor costs as well. And there's a very good technology university in Johor. One of my co-founders actually came from that school. Excellent technical competence. And that's the same across the board, right? So to give you some scale, like in Philippines, I believe the average fresh grad out of one of the best Filipino universities would be $700, $800 US. In Indonesia, it's roughly the same. Malaysia, it's a little bit higher, 10% higher than that. Singapore is on par almost with Australia. So that's what a lot of the Koreans are doing. They're hiring offshore teams out of Philippines, out of Vietnam, out of Indonesia as well, to serve the local markets. And the best way to do that is to start with the local partner, right? Because you don't want to be managing a Filipino or Vietnamese when you're sitting out of Melbourne, because then the shit's going to be very, very different. And I know this because we have an office in Indonesia. We had an office in Bangkok. We have an office in Malaysia as well. The biggest problem here is managing your resources or labor in all these different markets. So if you can do it with a partner, that's a very small, easy first step for you. Anybody, any other questions?
What is the main difference you would say in deal closure?
Sorry?
Deal closure between Southeast Asia and say Australia?
I don't know how to answer that question. Give me the context of deal closure in Australia.
Like most of the business deals that you close, right? Because you need to have your lead first, right? You have a contact, but it generally happens in bars and clubs.
In Australia, it happens in bars and clubs. Well, I guess the world is not so different after all, man. No, it's similar. If you're familiar with the Chinese term Guangxi.
Like China is.
Yeah, so China is very famous for it, right? This, you do like 20-course dinners, and then you go for drinks afterwards, and you sign a contract at a bar. But in this part of the world, in Singapore, no, you're not allowed to do that, so don't. But in the rest, you need to develop relationships. So which is why FaceTime I think is very, very important, because then there are a lot of intricacies, especially in conglomerates in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia as well. Family ties really, really matter, right? And there are certain key holders within each position, whether they're in procurement, whether they're in strategy, whether they're in IT, or even like the owner themselves. So the more you invest time with these people, it's not just to build a relationship with them, but to find out how the procurement, who you need to speak to, and which part of the deal to further what you are trying to do. So it's similar-ish in a way, but the relationship has a different context, I believe, whereby the first person you go out for drinks with will teach you who to go to next, who to go to next, who to go to next. So you're on a journey, on a quest. You're playing a computer game, I guess. Yeah. So I guess relationships, what you're trying to say is it matters. It matters a lot here as well.
Can you give us more like compare with the marketing driving and also product driving? So there was the differentiation because Jerry says our company come here, we can provide AI service to corporate, but what we find is that it take a long time to provide our location with the local people. It's probably take us 3 or 6 months. And after that, our company changes strategy. So right now we are more designed for product driving.
Product-driven growth?
Yeah, so this is the less like a communication, but we still want to know how even the product driving, how we can enter South Asian market.
Yeah, so for product-led growth, and this is a very interesting strategy, right? So in the B2B space, product-led growth in this part of the world, I think, And again, this is just my opinion. Like all of you, I'm still trying to figure things out, and I will continue to try figuring things out. Product-led growth for B2B, I think, is a little bit more difficult. But the easiest way to do it, caveat, would be if you're very, very clear around segments, markets, so verticals, markets, and ICPs, BPs. And the thing about Southeast Asia is it offers you sufficient scale, meaning, okay, if you were trying to sell to a bank in Australia, maybe it would be a handful of banks. But in Southeast Asia, you could try with the Singapore banks, you could try with the Malaysian banks, you could try with the Thai banks, you could try with the Indonesian banks. There are tons of them, right? So if you pick a specific vertical with a specific value proposition, which is what product-led growth should be anyway, then you won't be spending too much resources spraying different kinds of industries, right? So for product-led growth, I believe you still need to combine it with some sort. If you're familiar with the term ABM, account-based marketing. Account-based marketing works very, very well in this part of the world. But account-based marketing is also multi-channel. So you need to target different people in different parts of the firm. So that's, I don't think that's a great, because I'm not saying don't do product-led growth, but that's the only way I think it works.
Do you think like the South Asia, like these kind of people, they are either to like a subscription from software, AI?
Of course, yes. So that's the thing. A lot of people. So when you talk about price sensitivity, so price sensitivity in terms of just now you saw the GDP numbers, right? In Indonesia, GDP per capita is something like 4,000. In Philippines, it's 4,000. In Malaysia, I think it's 15, 16. Not PPP, right? Just absolute numbers. So on a consumer basis, yes, there is price sensitivity. On a corporate basis, they're buying stuff from Microsoft, they're buying stuff from OpenAI. Some of these guys are buying their own like NVIDIA chips. So there will be a little bit more price sensitivity than a market like Australia, but it's not as significant as on the consumer space. Yeah. And they're buying softwares from like for example, Salesforce, license-based model, Oracle. So yeah, they're very familiar with that.
Or maybe you can give us more like e-commerce in South Asia, because we're building AI agents just right now, particularly for e-commerce, potential can be another industry.
Yeah, so that's a very, very interesting thing. It's interesting you brought up e-commerce. So e-commerce in this part is super interesting because of the market size, right? And the biggest unicorn in this part of the world is the Indonesian Gojek GoTo, which is an e-commerce play. And over the last 6 to 12 months, there's been a lot of agentic AI built for e-commerce, but native to this part of the world. So if you are building a product like that and there are competitors in this space, you need to be very, very cautious around cost. Because developers in Indonesia are not getting paid 70,000 Aussie dollars. So you just need to be very conscious about value proposition, your USP. Because if you look at AI agents, unless the tech is really top-notch, what a lot of large conglomerates in this part of the world, so I'll give you an example, right? Salesforce, I was one of the, when Salesforce started in this part of the world in around mid-2010, so 2015, we were a customer of Salesforce, and then they scaled in Southeast Asia, so they started winning big contracts with a lot of the conglomerates. But over the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of these guys have actually then switched out of Salesforce into cheaper platforms. So Freshworks is one of them. I think HubSpot, Zoho. And the price of these platforms are all, I think, on a license basis, anywhere from like 20% to 30% off Salesforce. So price sensitivity happens on that stage. So if you have functionality of your product, I would focus on the base functionality first, so that before you actually go into higher value added item. So going back to e-commerce, there are a lot of local producers now. In Indonesia, agentic AI for e-commerce. So if you are trying to compete in that space, just be very, very aware of your value proposition and the cost that comes along with it. Yeah.
Just a question, not around the AI, but around payments. So I noticed in Singapore, there's so many payment providers, there are so many payment devices on every shop. If we were to launch a payment solution here, what's the market look like?
That's a great question, and unfortunately, I don't have an answer off the top of my head. Vanessa, why do you the payment spaces? From what I know, a lot of the payment solutions that are being used are not proprietary to this part, so they're not principal to this part of the world. So there are a lot of distributors or resellers, the ecosystem play for payments is actually very, very wide, right? There are no originators here. So that's the only thing I can say right now, but I can look into it and send you more information.
And how competitive it is? Do you know, like the rates? Some countries differ, like US, the payments are really competitive. Australia, not so much. How is it Singapore in that regard?
I'm not, to be honest, I'm not sure about specifically within payments, the margins you're talking about, right? How much you charge per transaction or percentage of the transaction. I'm not very familiar with that, but I can get back to you because one of the companies that we work with, they do POS distribution in the entire Philippines. So I can put you on a call with somebody and maybe you could discuss it with them.
Thank you.
Because it's not my area of expertise, unfortunately. Any other questions? Do we need to get on the bus already? No?
Almost.
Go ahead.
How much do you lean into government support when you do a go-to-market strategy for a company? When you talked about MDEC earlier, like are there entities in the region that do it better than others that you see?
Great question. So Singapore, and again, I might be biased because I'm native Singaporean. I'm half Indonesian, but I grew up in Singapore. My company is incorporated in Singapore. Singapore has this excellent plan where, and this is what I tell all my startups as well. If you are trying to target Southeast Asia as a market, your first entity, if you're going to incorporate, should be out of Singapore. Why? Because there's a very big, I'm an EXCO member at SG Tech, which is one of the largest tech associations, and they run so many programs which are practically free to help Singapore companies scale into the rest of Southeast Asia. So, and within Singapore as well, if you're targeting SMEs, there are a lot of grants for digitalization that SMEs, small medium enterprises, can tap onto. So I'll give you an example. If you are trying to sell, let's say, an AI solution into medium-sized manufacturer, a lot of the spending that they will spend on your solution can be subsidized by the government up to the tune of 70%, with a cap of maybe, I think, 200, 300, 400 grand. So the grants for buyers in Singapore is actually pretty big, and the grants that they give you as the principle of technology to expand out of Singapore is actually really, really big as well. So you get it on both sides, right? One, when you think about cost of doing business, the go-to-market strategy costs are usually quite big, just flying out of Singapore, for example. So in Singapore, for example, you get 200% tax exemption on flights. So if I'm flying into Indonesia, the flight costs me $200, I get to take a $400 write-off on my profit from that. I stay in a hotel, that classifies as a tax exemption as well, that's a government grant. So Singapore is built for companies to do business outside of Singapore. But the grants in Malaysia, you're talking about MDEC. MDEC promises you that, MDEC usually, they promise to introduce you to certain people. So if you tell them who your ICP and DPs are, and they'll try to set up meetings for you. But in terms of financial grants in Malaysia, it's not that much. In Indonesia, it's almost non-existent because the government takes a more supportive approach as opposed to a direct approach for transformation or digitalization. So grants, in my mind, there's no question. If you want to target this part of the world, set up an entity here. EDB will give you, EDB is the Economic Development Board, they'll give you a lot of grants, they'll give you a lot of incentives, especially if you're within deep tech. And yeah, I guess the Victoria people can help you introduce it.
That's some great questions there, thanks Troy. When it comes to SG Tech, MDEC up in Malaysia, EDB, we've got broad contacts that we're very, very happy to make some introductions there for those three agencies. Yeah. So don't hesitate, let us know.
Anything else?
Quick one.
Go ahead.
Steph said earlier before when we were talking about proof of concepts that she's moved away from doing. What would your recommendation be in this market, obviously?
On what?
On POCs. So what would your recommendation be to Steph if she's moved away in the Australian market doing free POCs? Would you say she would have to move back towards that for this market?
Sorry, say that again.
So the free POCs.
Free POCs.
What is your?
In Australia, I've moved away from free POCs and we've moved to a paid model with incentive off the license if it lands and progresses through to a deal.
So it's very clear from a POC, like if we hit these targets,
Yep.
It's a paid POC, and if we hit these targets, you're going to give us the full project.
Yep.
See, that's what I've seen a lot of companies try to do. But again, right, my suggestion, especially if you're new and there's no awareness, do the free POC, right? Because in doing the free POC, you get to decide whether this is something you can repeatedly do.
Yep.
So while you are shifting away from it in Australia, which is, I'm assuming, a more mature market for you, you have a little more understanding, you have a bigger network, you can rely on certain people to. But in Southeast Asia, just having a free POC makes people a little bit more receptive.
Yep.
And in doing a POC, you get to learn so much about how they're set up, who the key buyers are. And eventually, maybe after doing 2, 3, you can decide, you can then assess again whether this is something you want to do. But for most of my companies, and again, the wonderful thing about business is, I'm not an expert. I don't think there are many. I wish I was Warren Buffett, but I'm not. Right? So you just keep trying different things at different points in time. But for all our companies that I sit on the board of, I always tell them that try to do free POCs, especially if you're new. And then once you have some data around, okay, I've done 3, 7, 8, 9 POCs in Philippines, what's my conversion rate, what are the kind of companies that convert, can I then take that data to try it in Malaysia or Thailand, right? So I would recommend free POCs. And I know in most developed markets, they're trying to move away from that, but I wouldn't do it.
What about like digital advertising, particularly for business software or like enterprise? In Australia, we're seeing a few different strategies. LinkedIn, in our experience, has been very expensive, not very effective. Some people using Meta platforms now more to access people.
So Meta is very, very cheap, yeah. Especially if you do the thing about Southeast Asia that you can do that I found work is effectively do location-based targeting. So Jakarta, for example, is vast, right? 10 million, 12 million people. But there are certain centers where you can do Facebook ads, which makes it really, really cheap. But on the other hand, LinkedIn, if you look at LinkedIn penetration numbers for Southeast Asia versus even the US or Australia, it's horrific. And it's not a platform that people like using. So LinkedIn will still charge you for impressions and click, and the numbers go, what I've seen, the numbers can go up to $20, $30 because a lot of American big tech have converted to doing only purely digital advertising in this part of the world. One of our clients, they basically stopped doing events and they moved to a digital first strategy. I don't think it works, but you will then be competing with them for that 1 or 2 leads, right? And you do not want to be competing with them for budgets, right? Because their cost per click, they can afford to do a lot more than you. But what I would say is Facebook ads still pretty cheap just because it's very vast, but you need to do a little bit of location-based targeting. So if you know what your ICPs are, where their offices are, where their main buildings are, you can target those locations, and that's what I found to be quite useful. But other than that, if you're doing consumer stuff, Instagram, Facebook works as well. But on the B2B side, I wouldn't. I stopped doing LinkedIn marketing middle of last year. Too expensive.
Yeah.
And the results, the ROI just doesn't make sense. Just to give you a real case study for this, right? We used to spend something like 17 US on a cost per click basis for one of our ads, and we shifted from instead of spending $17 on a cost per click basis, what we did was we got emails. We sent out email and saying, hey, if you would like to meet us, we'll give you a, I don't know, this was in Malaysia, we would give you a 20 ringgit Grab voucher, which is a $5 Grab voucher. That got us much better responses than the $17 I was paying LinkedIn. And the money goes into their pocket, right? Not to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So be creative with that.
Like what was the PR?
PR is declining in this part of the world. It used to be quite good 4, 5, 6, pre-COVID, 6 years ago. We used to have our PR agencies, but a lot of that has gone online. A lot of the newspapers and trade publications in this part of the world have more or less shut down. Singapore, it still works, but in Thailand, in Malaysia, PR does not. So the traditional measures of PR value does not really work that much here unless you're willing to spend a lot with a media agency and couple it with digital advertising. You're not doing PR yourself, right? I wouldn't recommend doing PR yourself.
But like in Australia, PR, it was prevented.
Yeah, here, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it doesn't work as well. So even the large firms who run PR agencies, they've just moved the budget away from PR agencies because press coverage, especially the news feed in Thailand, especially, it's a lot of newspapers have actually stopped doing just news reporting, so they do paid ads themselves. So you have an option to either buy a paid ad or to do PR right nowadays. So that landscape has changed quite a bit over the last 6 years. So we used to have a PR agency in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, 7 years ago. But post-COVID, what we found was that didn't work as well for us. But the large companies are also doing it. So the Microsofts of the world, the Amazons of the world.
Yeah, like coming to news channels or something like that. How does it work for you?
There are too many news channels. You know? Like, if you were to look, because Indonesia has its own news channel, Channel News Asia is one thing you can do like that, which is regional. But otherwise, you're looking at independent news channels in each country, each market. I'll leave that to a PR agency. I can do it myself. And it becomes expensive.
Are you aware of any like good reports that cover like what social media platforms and like media outlets that
in different countries?
that buyers,
we have some information. I'll send it to you. I'll send it to everybody.
Folks, I might just jump in there. We'll be on the bus in 10 minutes. So we sort of start to wind up now. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 more questions. And then we'll head on out the door and in the bus and on to our next part of the program. So any last minute questions for Moser or YY?
Thanks, that was excellent.
Yeah, thanks team. That was wonderful. Thanks very much. So folks, again, we've got about 10 minutes. We'll step on out of here in less than that, so we can be on the bus. Because we've got a bit of a not a long drive, but we've got to get into the bus. So grab another bottle of water if you wish. Again, the washroom is just here, and ask a couple more questions among yourselves if you wish. But I'll start the run momentarily.
Is this free seat?
Yeah, but of course we do.
Okay.
Yeah, we our own yeah, very familiar. Yeah, very much. You guys are
good to know. Yeah, I think it's better if the one representative is on the table, not one behind that. That would be it's free sitting, but if you could have one representative in front and one behind, that's great.
Chosen representative from the table.
Sure everything is in order.
Yeah. It's everywhere.
It's just interesting, yeah.
Which company?
Oh, thank you. Hi Hazel, sorry I don't have any cards.
Okay. How things? Yeah? He's come last year.
Yes.
Last year.
Yeah. We've got a private sovereign.
How do you find it?
Sovereign AI technology. So we built a private AI. Companies can deploy and use as open source.
And then what do I do with it?
Everyone in the business is a salesperson, right?
That's unfortunate. This time around, I mean, these days, actually, everywhere is AI. AI
So you're in the habit of collecting business cards, that's clear. Do you have like a point are you got to hear?
I'm the CEO.
Oh, you're the CEO. Sorry.
That's right.
Yeah, how big is it?
We're a startup.
I know, I think so.
Yeah, but we've it's been incubated out of our enterprise SaaS group, analyzing the systems behind noms. So, but this is our product we really worked on decision. We just spun it out as its own thing. This is first.
So if you look around and you feel that like you have not met this person before, high chance they were not there in the morning. So please feel free to exchange name cards and make some connections before we officially start the program.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that's
So officially actually on time.
I thought I was gorilla doing
Are we going to go around and introduce ourselves?
Are you the solo attendee from
Sorry? We were at another event this week. Put on by where was the event? Where was the event?
I just grabbed my old business cards while I was coming, you know. I forgot. Only the email address is there. Only the email address and the phone number. Is that guy competitive? What's that? No, the guy I was talking to.
Maybe you've restricted
Is he competitive? No, not really. He's focusing on medical.
Mostly Singapore. How long have you been there?
Sure, thanks, YY. Hi, everybody. For the delegation, I know that you know me, but for everybody else in the room, I'm Jason Fuller. I'm the Trade Director with the Victorian State Government here in Singapore. I want to quickly recognise my colleagues. Irwan behind you, he's in Jakarta. Trent over here is in Vietnam. Troy, who's coming in, is actually from Melbourne, and he's brought the delegation here to Singapore. Thank you very much to My Republic for working closely with AIBP and for hosting us here today, and we're very much looking forward to the session. Thanks,
Thank you so much, Jason. And over to you, Imran. Thank you very much for lending us your office, and we look forward to hearing more about what My Republic is and how we can potentially work together with you.
Sure. You know the saying goes, mi casa, su casa, right? My home is your home as well. So welcome to Toa Payoh. I hope the journey wasn't so arduous. Oh, hey, there you go. The guy there, he's Terry, he's my counterpart. So anyway, thanks for coming down. I hope the journey to Toa Payoh isn't so heavy. But yeah, with My Republic, we started off about, 14 years ago? Yeah, right? 14, yeah. Yeah, 14, yeah. Yeah. Come on down, man. Come on down. Yeah. So this is Terry. So my name is Imran. I'm the head of ICT. So I run the enterprise ICT side of the business. This is my counterpart. He runs the consumer side of the business. Right? So Terry looks after all the residential lines, whereas I look after the more boring stuff. Yeah, yeah, really boring. He falls asleep with the BOD meetings. So in any case, I think we started off about 14 years ago. We generally are an ISP. I think you guys are familiar. We provide internet links to Singapore. We are currently we are the best. We got voted the best broadband service provider.
In all of Asia.
In all of Asia.
You guys ever do the speed test, speedtest.net and check your internet? Google is the largest in the world for that. So we got all of Asia, we were the fastest for the last 2 years, and then we also got the best, which is across speed, video streaming, and browsing, web browsing.
Yeah.
So we got that this year as well. So we beat out Japan, Korea, all the ISPs. So there's about 150 that it was launched. So yeah, so we're very well known as the gamer ISP in Singapore. So we have, I think, 85% of all the esports facilities here in Singapore are my republic. We do a lot of the major events in the region. So Singapore is one of the capital esports for Southeast Asia. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with that. You guys all look like esports players, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Mobile Legends, Bang Bang.
Yeah.
We got a
League of Legends.
There you go, League of Legends. Good, good. So yeah, we have a lot of fun in the space. I think that Marco is one of the more innovative ISPs, I think, in the region. Obviously, we were in Australia before. That's now Superloop. Still in New Zealand. Still in Indonesia as well. We're also known as the gamer ISP there as well. And we have a lot of fun. Do a lot of innovative things. But back to you.
Yeah, on my side, we look after like AI, cybersecurity and stuff, cloud, and we are the first in the market to launch an AI automation box all-in-one, which had a bit of fanfare, I think, about the last 2 weeks. So that was a major win for the enterprise side of the business. But David actually launched something pretty cool. He launched a card gaming side of the business, which actually does surprisingly pretty well. In the Singapore market. You all look like card gamers.
You guys probably all look like what is an ISP getting into the trading card game space? Well, it's one of these things where I think in telecommunications and all over the world has become very commoditized for mobile. We have one of the cheapest mobile prices in the world right now. We have, I think, a $6 plan in the market, which is actually ours. And I think it has 200 GBs of data. It has roaming in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand. It just has caller ID, everything that you can possibly get. So that's pretty much almost free. We're really kind of going towards that. And people have been saying that for years, and it's actually happening here. Singapore tends to be a little bit ahead of the curve. So because of that, we have to find other kind of income streams and things like that. And so we've always been, if you look at Singapore, probably 80% of the gamers know who we are. If you look at the broader market, maybe you have like about 20%. So like mom and dad and grandma and granddad are kind of know who we are. So what's the next best thing outside of there? Well, a lot of gamers are also trading card games, which is a huge thing, $70 million market in Singapore. Expanded that area. There was no single anchor partner in this region. So we made deals with Disney, so we have a 2-year deal with them, and Hasbro. And now we've been very successful in the space. Big, huge shows. We did a 5,000 person show. We're doing a 20,000 person show in March. We have a first hybrid telco trading card game store, which sounds insane. But every single time we've done anything, trading card game bundles with Magic and Pokemon with a broadband, it's been going up the road. We can't get enough stock to actually go. So these kind of things are bringing in a lot of extra income for us, a lot of extra profit. Cards are very profitable, especially when you're a key distributor. As well as it's a lot of word of mouth and a lot of marketing. Because there's so many people who are, Google prices are going up, in online ads. So where do you spend your money? Out of home, things like that. So word of mouth, that kind of like supporting the community, grassroots, where we're able to kind of break through Singtel and StarHub for gaming. We're doing the same in the trading card space, and it's working really, really well. So it could be innovation from tech, but it could be actually innovation going into the completely opposite direction with paper and people on the ground, where there's both support. So going where the communities go, and that's been a really successful strategy for us.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, we're taking a very boring business, which is internet providing, and expanding it to find VAS. I think generally across the room, a lot of you all are also business owners, probably finding your own footing as well. So, if your key takeaway from us is that always keep trying something new, right? Don't say no to like weird business cases, even though financially may not make sense. You gotta try something. Keep trying. I used to run my own little business as well. I know fundamentally it's a bit hard, but A, don't stop. B, there's always something that someone will buy.
Wait, I'm not have a second business.
Oh, second business.
So you guys are all from Victoria? Are you guys business owners and speak for the government?
I think Victoria, I think Indonesia as well is here, right?
That's government.
That's the government.
The delegation, yeah.
The delegation from Victoria.
Victoria, nice. I haven't been, I've been to Perth and Margaret River and then a separate trip. I just went to Canberra and to Sydney, all on the coast, very beautiful, but really looking forward to going to Melbourne. It's probably the best city in Australia.
Yes. All business, yes.
Wow. Geelong and Geelong, Mount Maskell. I think there's lots of good spots there. So looking forward to it.
Give us a call for you.
So yeah, happy to have you all here. Have fun. Like what I say, Mikasa Sukasa. The pantry is yours as well. So we are effectively told all the guys inside don't come out. Have fun. So thanks once again.
There's a little bit of rivalry over there. We'll dig deeper into the business between the friendship rivalry, but that's what we are here to do. I hope that they get a chance to interact with you a little bit more. I was thinking, because there are so many fresh faces in the room itself, perhaps we can start off by doing a very quick introduction about yourself, your company, what you're hoping to achieve with this mission, who you're hoping to meet. We'll go one round across the room, and then after that we'll break out for lunch. So this is your little work you have to do as part of working lunch before I give you lunch. That's what we do in Singapore. You have to work for your lunch. So shall we start off with the gentleman in the corner, and then we'll go run round, and then we'll go to the back.
Yeah, just as a quick reminder, we have 30 seconds for questions.
From Melbourne, so our company is focused on AI agents, but in particular for the e-commerce. I've been in the delegation group of twice. I got a very good experience. So right now we have a majority of clients in the North America, but we're going to ambitious into the South Asia market. So you have to create a lot of partnership with the professional people, and also Sex Jason, who is the professional sex support.
Hi, my name is Dennis from Expertise AI. We do agentic AI deployments. We just turn everything and anything to conversations, voice or chat or however anything. And I'm here with Jason, and we're looking to focus on fundraising in this visit this time. I attended last year as well. It was great. Looking forward to achieving this.
Hi, I'm Hazel. I'm from ST Engineering Singapore, and Suvin actually invited me here to kind of like network and meet up. If you don't know about ST Engineering, we are one of the biggest company, and I was supposed to, be in line to host you all in ST Engineering, and I hope that next year, perhaps you have the opportunity to visit us. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, I'm Todd. I'm CEO of New Dialogue. We're an Australian AI startup. We build a private AI platform for regulated businesses working in regulated industries. So think healthcare, government, financial services who don't want to trust their data with opaque public models. I'm here with Ankit, who's in our partnership management, and Matt, who's our executive director.
Ankit from New Dialogue, obviously. So we help startups, capital raisings, ASS listings, something like that. So a couple of them.
So my name is Pet. I'm from Alibaba Cloud. I'm based in Singapore. We are the cloud and AI digital arm of Alibaba Group, which is a conglomerate across the world. So my role here is to build strategic relationships and partnerships with companies around the world, and also with governments across the globe as well. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Ash. I am from Seekrowin. I'm the CEO and co-founder. I'm here with Jay, who is my co-founder. We're both engineers. I'm an AI and automation engineer, and Jay is a mechatronics and mechanical engineer. We've spent the last 10 years working at industrial sites, energy sites, and advanced manufacturing sites. So our startup basically helps these companies optimize their processes and reduce any inefficiencies. We're an AI industrial autopilot. Nice to meet you guys. I'm looking forward to collaborating. Oh, and we're here, I forgot to say that, but we're here for two reasons. One is to look at potential partnerships and clients in the manufacturing and energy sector, and the second one is for capital raising, because we're raising our round at the moment. So happy to connect.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I'm from BGL. We're basically a software company that provides
a lot of different compliance software for accounting firms. We're mainly based in Australia. We've been in Australia for about 20-25 years, but we are relatively new to Singapore, the Singapore market. So for us, it's about seeing how the accounting and the financial services industry works, and also learning from others how they are incorporating AI and changing in this world. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Ken Rodrigues from DHI. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the company. We are an AI company that extracts structured, unstructured data from public information, mostly to analyze it to find financial risk, business risk, industry risk. Our key targets are essentially stock markets, regulators, credit assessment agencies, credit rating agencies, and the primary reason we're here is to find partners as we are looking to grow into Malaysia, because we've already got a beachhead there with the stock exchange, and expand into the region.
Matt, as Tom mentioned, also from New Dialogue, just to build on what Todd had said, in Australia we've got a massive adoption of AI. We've just completed a study on ASX 200 companies looking at their public disclosures, and around only a quarter of ASX 200 businesses are actually disclosing AI adoption in meaningful ways in their disclosures. It's probably among the lowest among our peers in the world. And really sophisticated adopters are engaging in sovereign builds. Like, the big reason holding businesses back is risk and a concern with sharing confidential and sensitive data with opaque models. So that's absolutely where we want to help drive adoption, by giving them a safe space to influence their most sensitive data.
Hi, we are Ingenuous. We are financial crime solution providers. We are based in Melbourne. I am Prem. I am the senior data scientist in the company. So we provide end-to-end financial crime solution for banking, insurance, super, any financial organizations that having the transactions. So we have our clients in Australia, also in Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, and Cambodia as well. So we are here to look for more clients.
Hi, I'm Steph Kohler, like Coke, but different. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Legantic. So we're a no-code platform that helps bring emerging technology and make it easy to use. We didn't do that. It's like that's the right on cue. I've got my co-founder and deep technologist Mark Kohler here. He's also my brother. And our third co-founder is holding up the fort back in Melbourne. So we're based in Australia. We export a little bit to the US, but we also wanted to understand some of our closer regions where we could start engaging with. And this is really a learning tour for us. We're 2 years old, so very early stage in that sort of startup space. So it's been great so far, and look forward to meeting more.
Chris Farrelly, I run APJ for Concentric AI, who are a Series B data security governance platform. We've been in the region now since January, been founded since 2018. My team's based in Melbourne and I'm based in KL, so I spend most of my time between Malaysia and Melbourne, which means I get to eat a lot of good food and drink a lot of good coffee. Looking to see how you guys kind of are working in the Melbourne market, and what your kind of experiences are coming into APJ, and anything I can help with, but also build some relationships as well along the way.
Alfie?
I'm Alfie Fujitsu. I'm CEO for ASEAN. Typically, we think that AI is quite a big area that I don't think one company can dominate, and we actually work with a lot of partners to see how to bring the best solution to our customer, and we are focusing on customer problem statement. From there, we really work with different partners to example the solutions. We also do investment in the startup. We have an investment arm. Actually, our global head is based in Singapore. So it's probably something we can share and exchange the solutions and explore.
Thank you, Alfie. Do you want to introduce?
Good afternoon, Trent Davies with the Victorian Government team. Lead Director for Trade for Southeast Asia. Our role is really about building these types of platforms, providing the information that Victorian companies need work in the market and helping to facilitate connections with partners such as those from Singapore here today. So.
I'll stand up as well. This is the stand up one. Andrew Wilson, so CCO for the company's called Nexus MD AI. We're another agentic AI company. We focus in the healthcare space. We really found a niche in the emergency care space, so we've got a lot of tools working in virtual emergency departments, ambulance, emergency departments, and leading through to critical care as well. And probably need to have some dialogue with the new dialogue guys, because that sovereign data is a big issue in healthcare. So looking forward to this. We're here for fundraising and also looking for particular markets in Asia. We're doing a little bit of work in Indonesia, but that's all at this stage.
Hi, I'm Chad. I'm from Crayon. I look after the product management and ISV business in Crayon. Right. Crayon is an Norwegian-based company, but today we are part of the software one. Right. So we just announced the acquisition of software merging with them in July. Right. So now doing the integration. We basically specialize in cloud business and also licensing. Today we partner with major cloud providers like Alibaba, Microsoft, AWS, and Google. Right. So now we help ISV to onboard to the cloud, make sure it's safe, secure, optimized. At the same time, we help ISV to go to the market, leveraging on the Crayon ecosystem of direct customers and channel ecosystems.
I'm Eden from Crayon. Yeah, it's same also.
You realize that you can catch us. Shall I?
Oh, my name is Pankaj. I'm from HCL Tech. We are a services company, provide IT, infra, app support, engineering, R&D services, and I manage the manufacturing, developers, and logistics vertical for Singapore. I'm here to understand how we can leverage your expertise and your understanding of AI and how we can work together to reach out to customers and clients.
Thank you so much.
Hi, afternoon. I'm Terence from Association of Information Security Professional, bracket ASP from Singapore. So we are a community platform. We bring all the corporates and individuals in the cyber security space to come into the ecosystem, and of course for the companies to bring certain values to the organization as well.
Oh. Hi everyone, I'm Alexis Lee from AMD. For those who doesn't know us, our full name is Advanced Micro Devices, sorry. But anyway, I manage the ASEAN business, so we are from the commercial side. So for commercial side, we take care of commercial devices sold to corporates and enterprise. And we have the data center products, which we have our CPU and AI accelerator, and including the NIC cards for AI currently. So I'm a business development role and a sales. So we do help or work with AI startups and also ISV providers to link them back to our OEMs that we work with, as well as to the end user and as well as to the CSPs. Yeah, nice meeting you all.
Thank you, Alexis.
Oh, yeah. I'm Kelvin. I'm the CISO for My Republic. So we are using a lot of AI solutions for our SMB customers to how to integrate and transition into the AI solution. So that's why I'm here for the networking and then also know more about the AI solutions that you are providing.
Hello, hi everyone. My name is Augustine. I'm from Jingden Capital. We are a pretty newly set up asset management firm and part of the deep tech and venture capital arm. So basically, just come here to understand, the startup AI startup landscape from Australia.
Thank you so much. You've met Diego and Akisha from our team. Quick introduction from you. Diego?
Yeah, hi, my name is Diego. I work for AIBP, and yeah, looking forward to meeting you all.
Hi, my name is Akisha. I also work for AIBP, same role as Diego in partnerships. Nice to meet you all.
Hi everyone, I'm Kevin from SCAD. I'm co-founder and CTO there. We started around 6 years ago, so we're in the digital twin space. So initially, we're working with a lot of governments around like asset rich and resource poor people or I guess companies where you have rails, ports, universities where you have big building footprints but not able to manage it. So we built a platform to essentially say, hey, put all of your data, all your 3D data in one place, right? Because right now these people, they manage everything in spreadsheets, and we say we're going to bring that 3D context to you. And then so after we did that, they're like, hey, we want on-prem deployment, yada, yada, yada. So we're like, okay, cool, we'll help you deploy on-prem or in the cloud, wherever you want. And then the next problem they started to have around 2-3 years ago was saying, hey, we have so much data, how do we deal with it? And then so that's kind of when we pivoted into the AI space. We said, okay, well, because we have very wide and diverse customer profile, we couldn't build one AI for everyone because some of them want to work with images, some of them want to work with point cloud. So essentially we said, okay, well, we will provide the factory for you. You give us the training data, and then we'll do the training deployment of computer vision models for you or LLM models for you, and then we'll deploy it for you. But you can take that out, put it into your own solution, or whatnot. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. And in Singapore, what we're really looking for is just to better understand the building, the kind of landscape of the business, and especially get in touch with large asset owners to see if they have similar problems that the Australian government and the New Zealand government has. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Kiran. I'm a founder at iPoint. We are a retail management solution, started in 2014, and we got customers in now 50 plus countries, including Singapore. We are here to meet with prospective partners and get new customers.
Very clear cut. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Keith. I'm also from Scand. I am the lead 3D software engineer. So as Kevin mentioned, we are a digital twin platform, so I'm responsible for getting the data converted, ingested, and rendered on the browsers for our platform. So yeah, I'm just looking to learn a lot here about the landscape in Singapore. And yeah, thanks.
Hi, I'm Irawan. I'm from Victoria Government Trade and Investment Jakarta. So I'm assisting you guys if you want to penetrate the Indonesian market. Please don't hesitate to contact me for Vietnam, Trade and Jason.
Afternoon everyone, my name is Troy Too. I'm the Trade Manager for Technology at Global Victoria, which is the Victorian Government's trade facilitation agency. So it's my role to get these companies in this room opportunities in international markets and working closely with our colleagues from our Victorian Government Trade and Investment Offices, and been working closely with Jason on this program to bring the 15 companies to Singapore. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today and providing this opportunity to our companies, and hopefully if you're attending Tech Week Singapore, we'll see you at the Big Data and AI World exhibit over the next 2 days. Thank you.
So hi everyone, I'm Valerie. So I'm actually the product manager for Nutron Singapore. Yeah, nice to meet you. I will let my boss share more.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Dalton. I'm the VP for Product Solution and Marketing in Nutron DC Singapore. So Nutron DC Singapore, we were incorporated sometime last year, but we are actually a subsidiary of Telkom Indonesia, which is the largest telco in Indonesia, basically. So basically, we provide platforms to our customers, including data center platforms, connectivity platforms, and also GPU cloud, GPU bare metal. So I think the objective for me coming today is really to network with you guys to find potential partners that can add on our product portfolio. We also have MDI Ventures, which is a subsidiary of Telkom. They actually invest in startups. They provide funding for startups as well. So they are looking for innovative startups. So that's something that we could help as well. And also providing solutions to some of the people who need our GPU cloud or GPU bare metal. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So now you have a sense of who's in the room and who you're going to meet later on during lunch, right? I know I did say I'm not going to give you lunch until you've introduced yourself, so that now you've done your part. I need to do my part by giving you lunch. We did say it's a working lunch, so the lunch is prepared outside. We've also prepared a selection of Singapore food, snacks, ASEAN snacks, and also Australian snacks. There's a little bit of trivia. So beyond just doing business, it's about finding customers, partners, but it's also about understanding the culture. So we hope that through this session, you get to understand the culture. Later on, you will see that there's some tables spread around. Our local stakeholders have introduced themselves. I'm going to split them out into different tables. and you can consult them on some of the key areas that they're experts in, from public relations to doing business, scaling a Series B company to the next level, looking into business in Southeast Asia. I think we have quite a bit of experts in the room itself. So while you get your lunch, we will set up the tables, and I'll come back to you, give an introduction of each of the tables and who you can expect. But throughout lunch, I do hope that all of you can go to the different tables, speak to all our local companies who have been here, who have visited, who have had experience in driving business in Southeast Asia, and take away as much as possible. Try out your pictures of them, perhaps. Yeah. So with that, I'm just going to open the door, and feel free to join us. One little logistics issue: should you need to use the bathroom, right? The bathroom is right outside. So you head out, and you see a bathroom sign, so it's outside. It's not going to be within this area. It's going to be, you need to step a little bit outside. All right. And with that, I'm going to release you to lunch. Thank you.
Hey? Are you hungry? One day lah, one day. I'll let you know. I will let you know if it comes. Oh yeah, sure. I'm just gonna go around and say hi.
Hour.